Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and today I have something that I am so pumped to be able to do with all of you. I've been thinking about doing this pretty much all year, and I finally made it happen, and I'm so excited to bring you something that is new and different and really, really fun in the context of Commander. And to help me out with this, I brought on my co-host, the wonderful Melissa DeTora. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit of a different episode than what you all are used to. This is not going to be your short, bite-sized bits of information. It's almost going to be more podcast style. In fact, I probably will even put it up on places like Spotify or iTunes. So you can go download it, listen to it, on your jog or in the car or whatever sounds good to you. We're going to do something that I'm calling Commander Chronicle. So this is 2021 is 10 years of Commander decks. Hard to believe, but we've been making Commander decks for 10 years now. So all year I've thought about doing a retrospective and kind of going in and looking at what we did in that very first year and maybe walking through some different years of Commander decks. And this is that show. We're going to talk about the original decks 10 years ago. Now I brought in Melissa as my co-host for this. And Melissa, why don't you give them a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. So I guess we can start with how long have I been playing Magic? I started playing in 1997, so been playing for a very long time. Pretty much played Magic in every way that you can possibly imagine. I played casual, I played competitive, I played on the Pro Tour, I've been a Magic judge. I pretty much have done it all. I started working at Wizards in 2015, doing balance work and development work because of my professional Magic background. And I've been doing that for a very long time. Well, I started doing something new at Wizards, mostly at the start of the pandemic is when this started. I started working on Commander. So this is a very new experience for me. And I started working on it. And as time goes on, I was like, this is cool. I like this. I'm into this. Well, flash forward, I guess, a year and a half later, we are now starting a new play design team at Wizards where the focus is going to be on Commander and our more casual products like Universes Beyond and stuff. And my role on that team is the technical lead. So what that means is I'll be making final design decisions in terms of rate and balance on our Commander cards.
Yeah, so Melissa's going to be working really closely with folks like me and Glenn Jones and our great Commander group of designers. And it's really cool because she's got all this experience, right? She's been playing for ages. She's been on the Pro Tour, really strong player. But when it comes to Commander background of all the different decks we've made, a lot of this is kind of new to you, right, Melissa?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I have played lots of Commander over time. I've even played some of these Commander decks. But as far as the individual cards in the deck, I pretty much don't know what any of the cards are. I see a lot of these cards that, they get reprinted in every Commander deck. And I see them. I'm like, oh, I don't know what this card does. Or what is this card? We need to change it. And someone says, oh, that's from C16 or something. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I had no idea. So that's what we usually refer to as a black hole. It's just a group of cards or Magic sets that I just don't have any knowledge of because I didn't work on them or I didn't play them.
Yeah, and why I wanted to have you on the show is because I thought it'd be a great chance to have you on and kind of walk through the history of Commander decks together, hear about a lot of these cards. And many of them, like you said, you do know, right? You know the cards have gotten reprinted over and over and over again in many cases, but there's all kinds of weird old cards. And looking through the file for today, man, there are a lot of cards I did not remember from the first series of Commander decks that will be kind of fun to walk down memory lane. So this is something we're going to start doing this week with the very first episode of Commander Chronicle. And if you like it, if you enjoy this, please leave a comment down below, let us know. And my hope is we'll do it, for the next several weeks and go over all the Commander decks in time. But also if nobody watches this, then, I don't take up Melissa's time. So please let us know in the comments down below. I'm really stoked for it. I hope it's a big success.
Yeah, same.
And let us know. It's going to be great. It's going to be super exciting. Also for this very first episode, I don't know if I'm going to do it for every episode, but I reached out to the original design team of these Commander decks for a bunch of stories. And so they sent me a bunch of cool stories I'll be sharing along the way too. So we've got some cool inside design stuff. And I also just want to give a really quick shout out. So all year I've been thinking about doing this and doing some kind of retrospective on the Commander decks, but I could not figure out the format I wanted to do it in. And this show takes a lot of inspiration from another podcast show called The Receivables with Cedric Phillips and Patrick Sullivan. They're absolutely fantastic. What they're doing is walking down basically every Magic set ever and talking about them historically and their favorite cards or least favorite cards, funny stories, mechanics. And while this show is definitely its own thing and talks about some things that are on like the design side that they're not as much, it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from that. And a few sections are very, very, very inspired by their show. So if you haven't listened to the Receivables, they just dropped their Eventide episode. I'll put a link, I don't know, up here somewhere where you can go check it out. And I think they're doing Innistrad next week, so definitely a good time to tune in, hear about all the original Innistrad stuff. So big thanks to Patrick and Cedric for kind of blazing the trail, as it were, there. The show is called Commander Chronicle. That's the name Melissa and I settled on, was the best thing we came up with. Some of our alternative names, which are definitely way worse, were Retromander, which Melissa was like, you got to be joking me. Word of Commander, which is a play on Word of Command, a card that most newer players probably don't even know exists. Command Hour, Deconstructed Preconstructeds, which is a mouthful and definitely no one would ever remember. And one that is close to my heart, Swords to Now Shares. They were all bad. We threw them in the garbage bin. We worked on a bunch of different names and came up with this one instead.
I couldn't believe it when you sent me the list. I was like, what is this? I think we can do a lot better.
Yeah, right. So big shout out to my friend Sarah, who's in a Discord that I'm in. We're brainstorming ideas with a few people, and she's like, what about this? So hats off to her. But I say all of this for a very important reason. There is, we are not the only Commander Chronicle out there in the world. There's like an old video game trailer that's called Commander Chronicle. And despite some being down on SEO to start, we love the name enough that we went with it. So it's up to you to reply to this and leave comments and like it, share it with your friends. So hopefully we can overtake that trailer and be the dominant Commander Chronicle out there in the world. I would very much like for that to be the case. Okay, so before we go any further, I also want to say one more thing, then we'll get into the good stuff. So just stay tuned for a moment. But I just want to say there's a golden rule of this show. And I haven't even told Melissa this yet, but I'm sure she would agree.
This is all news to me.
All news to Melissa, which is we're going to be talking during this show about old designs and old sets and things that were made a long time ago, but they were made by a lot of talented people who put a lot of energy and work into this. So, and they're also our coworkers now. So as we're critiquing this is all from like a point of love and caring about Commander and loving what's going on out there. So, it's, even though if we critique stuff, we're never like going after a specific person. So I'll make that very clear. So, if you're listening back to this, Ken Nagel, and I make fun of one of your designs, it's nothing on you. It was 10 years ago. No one, as we'll quickly learn, 10 years ago in Commander decks was a very different time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things we embody as designers is having to like constantly debate with each other and tell people that their ideas should be changed or, aren't the greatest when it comes to certain designs. I know 10 years ago, my designs all sucked when I came to Wizards. So, it takes a long time to make good stuff. And some stuff always makes it through in sets that are like, maybe we should have done that. So just as we're going through this and, giving grades to mechanics and things like that, know that it's all awesome and Commander's a great format. Just, we're ranking things. Okay. So Commander 2011, or actually just called Commander, because at that point there weren't numbers, because who knows if we're going to make any more of these. I don't know.
Also, this was the set where the format became called Commander, because it used to be EDH. And I remember these decks came out, and I wasn't working at Wizards at the time, and they were like, okay, here are these new decks we're making, Commander. And I was like, what is this? No, this is EDH. What are you talking about, Commander? And it definitely took a long time to transition saying the word Commander as opposed to EDH.
Yeah, and many people still do. So if you hear EDH out there, it's short for Elder Dragon Highlander. It is what Sheldon and his play group called the format initially. And then when we adopted it, we changed it to Commander. Rolls off the tongue, one word, pretty snappy. And they've adopted that as well. Though, of course, many people, like I said, still call it EDH. And that was a big change, but one that I think the community has pretty much adopted over time. In terms of time frame, I thought this was pretty interesting. So this came out on June 17th, 2011. So to kind of set the stage, this is right after New Phyrexia, but before Magic 2012. And Magic 2012 was the core set with Bloodthirst, if you remember that one. And then actually after Magic 2012 was Innistrad. So that was our first time we were going to Innistrad. So pretty perfect that now is the time that happened. Interestingly, to really set the stage of when this was, just to get it in your mind.
All right.
This set came out, Melissa, 3 days before Stoneforge Mystic and Jace the Mind Sculptor were banned.
Okay.
Right? So
wow. All right.
That was a big moment. I mean, that was huge in Standard. There hadn't been bannings for like 6 or 7 years at that point. And, people were looking for alternatives. So it was actually a pretty good time for it to come out. People were like, hey, don't want to play, this Caw-Blade Standard format. Let's pick up these decks and give them a try.
Well, I still wanted to play that format, but that's besides the point.
Oh man, I would play Cobblade Mirrors all day. In fact, not the past couple years because of COVID, unfortunately, but every year on 4th of July, I often host a little party at my house. And one person, my friend Zame, comes over and brings 2 Cobblade decks. And we have our like traditional 4th of July Cobblade Mirror match that we play during the party. Just, to really throw back to the good old days.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it. In fact, the last time you did have this party, I was there and I did play the Cobblade Mirror.
Cobblade Mirrors, they're great. What's not to love about a Cobblade Mirror? Well,
it was great, yep.
Turns out a lot of players didn't enjoy it so much, but good time. So the first series of Commander decks was codenamed Bedlam. We'll get into that in a moment as to why that's important. It was 5 3-color Wedge decks. So wedges being the color combinations that are 2 allies plus 1 enemy, such as blue, white, and red. And there were 51 total new cards with 15 cards per deck. So it actually, now we often do like 17 new cards per deck. Or even actually recently in Innistrad, we went back to 15 new cards per deck. Well, that's actually what we started with, was 15 brand new cards in every deck. So 2011, long time ago, 10 years ago now. Melissa, what were you up to at this point in time? Were you playing professionally? What was going on in your life?
Let's see. So this was probably a time where I was maybe like not consistently on the Pro Tour yet, but I was playing lots of Magic. I remember doing things like the SCG IQs and stuff, because as you say, the Cobblade Mirror, I do remember winning an SCG IQ with Cobblade right around that time, actually. So I was doing lots of drafts, actually. So I used to host drafts at my apartment, and we would just always have like 6 players, and we would do like 3 drafts a night on any given night. And what I remember about these decks is, so in between drafts, or like maybe people left and we only had 3 players and we couldn't do a draft or whatever, we needed something to do. And we usually would do something like play Dominion or play Settlers of Catan. This was 10 years ago. Board games were much different back then. But we decided to actually all buy these Commander decks. So like, I remember I think I bought the Jeskai one, but I remember we all bought a bunch of decks. I think I bought the one that had Flusterstorm because I wanted to play that card in Legacy. That's like what I remember most about that. But yeah, we would play these Commander decks like as we were waiting for people to show up to draft.
Well, that's really cool that you used it as a way to pass the time while you're waiting for other folks to show up, which is great, right? It's like the format you can play. Well, games can be long, so maybe not between other formats, but like, hey, we got an hour and a half at the end of the night, or some folks showed up early, let's play a game of Commander. And it's also so low stakes, right? If things, if everyone shows up, you're like, okay, we'll just pack it up and, or leave it up and call it good. Yeah.
And funny thing is, you played a lot of 3-player games with these because as soon as the 4th person showed up, that was enough to draft. So we would just do like a 4-man team draft, like as soon as we had the 4. So we had a lot of 3-player games, which was pretty weird for Commander, I think.
I remember for me, even stranger is when these decks came out, I was like, okay, I'll try this Commander thing out. And I started playing Heads Up Commander. I was like, that's what Magic is, right? 1v1. So you've got a deck, I've got a deck. Let's battle against each other. And, not so much a thing that we tend to do these days.
Yeah, I have played a decent amount of one-on-one Commander. I think my first Commander deck was Sharum, the Shards of Alara artifact guy. And I was like infinite mind-slavering people. So put that one down pretty quick.
I had like an early Vendelian Click deck and an early Teferi deck where I'm like, it's great. I just play Teferi and counter all their spells for the rest of the game. Or Vendelian Click is my only creature in my entire deck, so I just control and then beat them with that. Commander's changed a little bit. Our perspectives have changed a little bit since that time, I would say. For me in 2011, this is actually interesting that it's the only Commander deck release that I wasn't at Wizards for, because I actually started in almost exactly 10 years ago in October of 2011. And I remember them coming out. And at the time, I was basically just trying to get a job at Wizards. I'm like, I knew it was what I wanted to do. It's what I'd always wanted to do. And I was trying to, figure out what to do to get in the door. And I was working on some of the overextended stuff, which would end up becoming Modern at the time. I actually have a pretty funny story where, so I'm lying in bed, right? And it's summer. I guess it's probably a little before they were released. It was when they were announced, maybe early in the year, 2011. And I'm lying in bed. I'm like taking a nap, and my phone rings, and I like wake up groggily, and I pick up my phone, and I look at who's calling me, and it's Aaron Forsyth. Aaron Forsyth is calling me, and I'm like, I don't really know Aaron. Like I might have met him once or something like that. Mm-hmm. But he's calling me. And I'm like, this is it. It's my call to the big leagues. He's going to be like, hey, come work at Wizards. I know, whatever. I thought when I was 21 years old. Let's make this happen. So I pick up the phone. And I'm like, hello. And he's like, hey, Gavin, is everything ready? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. What can I do for you? He's like, yeah, can you check the site to make sure everything's ready? And I'm like, yeah, of course. What's the site URL? Like, happy to help you out with this, Aaron. And he takes a brief pause and he's like, oh, I called the wrong Gavin. And he was meant to call Gavin Dugan of the Commander Rules Committee. Yep. And instead, I think he just like, due to Facebook, my name auto-populated on his phone or something. And he called me instead. And then we all had a good laugh about it and, set our phones down. But it was that moment where I was like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to get to work on Magic. But no, it wasn't meant to be. So it's funny that all these years later, we're both working on Commander now and still at Wizard, which is great. And it's actually the main thing I work on. So these decks came out. I did not play with them that much. In fact, I think I even, besides some one-on-one games, even saw them and was like, yeah, not really my bag initially. But very quickly, I began playing with my friends a little bit. Still one-on-one mostly, but just it was a cool way to play our cards that we hadn't played with in a long time. And that's kind of the idea, right? You had all these cards that maybe you had rotated out of Extended or something like that. And you could put them in these decks, or even after Modern came into existence, it was between Modern and Legacy. And, I always have loved 100-card singleton formats. I played like all kinds of Highlander variants. There was a format that was big on the West Coast for a little while called Type Dan Gray, which is a real blast from the past, if anyone out there remembers that. So
I've never heard of it. I have played 5-color.
Yeah, 5-color was huge in Seattle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it was huge where I'm from, but like there was a group who played, and I did have a deck, and I had my Jeweled Birds and my Contract from Below's, and we played for Ante and all that good stuff.
Do you want to explain what 5-color is for everybody out there?
Sure. I'm sure people are like, 5-color, what do you mean? Pretty weird to like just hear that term and like things like, what, Ante, what are you talking about? All right, let me see if I can remember it. So it is a 250 card singleton deck. And the rules are you have to have at least 20 cards per color in the deck. And that can include multicolored cards. So your Spirit Monger could count in your black slot or your green slot. And you played for Ante. And I think it was one-on-one. It was one-on-one, right? I don't think it was multiplayer.
Yeah, it was one-on-one. And yeah, you could play, if you were very brave, you would play for Ante. Around here in Seattle, I know a lot of folks played for Scribble Ante, where you would ante up cards, and then if you lost, the other person could like doodle on your card, right? So there's a lot of like...
That is how we played, yep.
Yes, there's a lot of like dual lands or whatever running around that have random stuff scribbled on them in the Seattle area.
Yeah, I have plenty of cards that just have like random friend signatures for like playing 5-color for Ante. But I do remember the format was all about like aggressively finding one of your Jeweled Birds so you could replace it with the Ante card. So you didn't have to give up your cool card if you were playing for real Ante. Like that was a big part of it.
Oh man, yeah, that is wild. Jeweled Bird. Contract from Below, of course, totally bananas card.
Yeah. When I started playing 5-color, I picked up 4 Contract from Below's right away.
And like most things were legal, right? So you could tinker out huge stuff. And anyway, it was a different format. It was a 100-card deck with, or maybe 150. I can't remember. But
I think it was 250. I believe. Someone can correct me if we're wrong, but on the other hand, who knows what this format even is unless you've been playing Magic for like over 20 years or something. Like this is ancient history here.
Right. So, I remember thinking when Commander came out, it's like this other thing, right? It's one-on-one competitive. And that's not what it is at all. And of course, Commander, as many of you know, came from Sheldon Menery and his group. Sheldon, of course, still part of the Commander Rules Committee today. And then he helped popularize it on websites like Star City Games and his own writing and in some articles he had written. And it just grew and grew and grew throughout the Magic community and the Judge community, especially into the beast it is now. And we'll get a little bit into the history of that in a moment when we talk about something else. And one thing that I think we haven't talked about yet, not just bounce around, but hey, it's a podcast. We don't need a strong narrative. Is Melissa, how long have you and I known each other? You've mentioned 20 years. I mean, we've probably known each other for at least, 15 years, something like that now? Yeah.
So what I do remember is we tested for Pro Tour Berlin together, which was in 2008. And we were on like some forums. We didn't test in real life together because, you're from Seattle. I was from Rhode Island. So we never did any of that, but I remember we had the forums, and that was 2008. But we must have known each other from before that, but I don't really recall when. Maybe a few years before that. I don't know. What do you think?
I think someone told me you were like an East Coast grinder, and at the time I was building out this team with a horrible name called Team Unknown Stars, which is very pretentious in retrospect, but it was a group of great folks. I had, like Ari Lax, Mate Zadelkai, Kyle Bogamus, like a bunch of players who would go on to do stuff. Even other future game designers too, like Jonathan Laux was in that group. Chris Mascioli, many great people, but I remember I wanted you to be on the team because I was like, I heard about this Melissa person from someone else, maybe even on the team, and brought you into the fold. And we tested for Berlin together, and then just kept in touch after that, I guess. And now to have you at Wizards, I mean, you obviously wanted to go do a lot of things since then, a lot of great competitive play, top 8ing a pro tour, all that kind of stuff. But then you came to work at Wizards and run many fun projects together. So it's wild, right? We both come from like a similar era of Magic. I started, my first set was Plane Shift. What was your first set?
My first set was Tempest, but I only played casually for my first couple years that I was playing. And my first PTQ was Mercadian Mass Block Constructed.
Oh boy.
And I guess technically my first draft was Urza's Saga Block, but I didn't know what I was doing, so we'll ignore that. But my first real drafts was Mercadian Mass Block. I drafted a ton of Mercadian Mass Block.
What a time to get into it. I'm sure, Rebels. I don't know if you played Rebels in that PTQ or not, but you probably lost Rebels.
I believe I did play Rebels, actually. There was, it was such a weirder time. There was not an internet, really. The internet was sort of there, but not really. You had a couple of random Magic websites, but it was very slow. So, these days, as soon as there's a tournament, you have results immediately. And you have results from hundreds of tournaments. But back then it was maybe there was a tournament and there was this website called the Dojo and maybe somebody posted to it, but maybe they didn't. It was a much different time. But I remember I did play Rebels at that first PTQ, and but I didn't know what I was doing because there was no net deck. So I was just like, all right, I'm going to play my 4/1 drop Rebels, my 4/2 drop Rebels, and my Lin Civi, or I don't even think Lin Civi was out. Yeah, I think it was just Mercadian Mass, but I could be wrong. It was a while ago. But I remember I lost to one of the a top Massachusetts player who was playing the meted out version of Rebels. It was Counter Rebels, where it was Rebels, but it had blue for counter spells and stuff. The actual literal counter spell, because that card was in Mercadian Mass. And I was like, oh man, I thought I had this great deck, but I just got totally outclassed by this guy, and I probably learned a lot that day.
Yeah, I remember waiting for issues of Sideboard, a magazine, to show up with the newest deck lists, or once the daily MTG existed, refreshing to try and find Mike Flores' column when it would update with all the deck lists from the previous week, right? It was a different time for sure. Rebels, good times. Speaking of things that are new though, so one of the things that happened in this set that was new for the first time were all these new cards. This was the first ever time we had printed cards like this. It was a deck product with 51 brand new cards that were not going through a set. We're going into Eternal formats and Commander straight through these precons. Do you remember what you thought about that at the time? Because I remember for me, it was a big deal. I'm like, oh, wow. They're creating new cards in a different way than I'm used to.
Yeah, I guess my feelings weren't as strong as yours, but I do remember I was like, oh, this is weird and different. And I do play Legacy, so this is something to get used to for Legacy. Now I have, instead of only thinking about one set every 3 months for Legacy, now I have to think about these new cards too. I remember at the same time, I think they made the Portal cards also Eternal legal.
Oh yeah,
roughly the same time.
That. Yeah.
So I think I remember that more strongly than I remember these Commander decks, but because I remember it probably happened roughly at the same time, and I was like, oh wow, I have to just see if any of these are playable in Legacy now, So that was mostly what I remember.
I remember I had a Grim Tutor, which was originally in a Portal set, and that announcement was made, and I was suddenly the hottest kid in my card shop, right? Because everyone wanted to get their hands on my Grim Tutor, which previously wasn't Legacy legal, but then turned out to be, because the Portal sets were not playable in Legacy for a long time. And then I think you're right, it was around this time. I'll have to look it up later. Someone in the comments can tell me if we're wrong, but I think it was around the same time roughly that happened.
Would make sense that they would make all of those legality happen at all the same time, just do it all at once. It's hey, we're going to do Eternal legal cards. So we have Commander products, and now we have Portal, right?
I think it was a little bit earlier. Oh, wow. We are very off, Melissa.
Oh,
we are so off.
How do you remember these things?
Well, I just Googled it.
They're too hard to remember. No, I meant in general, how do people remember these? We just need the internet for this kind of stuff now.
looks like it was 2005. So we're about 6 years too early, I would say.
Okay.
But still a fun fact for those who don't know, right? Cards that they were not legal at the time. Anyway, so, and then speaking of cards becoming legal, though, this also had a lot of reprints. And I know, like, nowadays, you're like, oh, reprints all the time, whatever, pre-con decks and, modern master style stuff. But at the time, like, reprints were just, like, not plentiful. Like, it just wasn't really a thing. Like, new sets would come out, and every now and then there was a dual deck. But to have reprints of this quantity was really strange and unusual. And we'll get into that, go into that in a little bit, I guess. I've got a section on that. But first, Melissa, I want to do something fun here. I want to talk through the design team for this deck. Okay, for these decks, okay? Because I don't know if you know who designed these, but I looked at the team that was very interesting. We kind of say a little bit about who they are, because some of these folks will be recurring characters. You will see if we do indeed do more episodes of this. So first of all, leading the design team. So you've got your design team. How sets were designed back then. You had your design team and you had your development team. So the design team did the initial work, trying to come up with the ideas and so on and so forth. And then they kicked it over to the development team, who would like tweak cards and make a bunch of the cards on their own to kind of massage everything and get it to right. Like designers kind of laid the groundwork, and then developers kind of ran with it, more or less. So the design lead for the first ever Commander decks for Bedlam was Ken Nagel. Still at Wizards today. Yep. Still making Commander stuff today. I've worked with him on a number of different products, and Ken's actually been making stuff for Commander for ages. When he led World Wake, he put Rexiel in the set to lead his own Commander deck. So that's where that card came from. We've got Mark Gottlieb. Have you worked with Mark much? I have, actually. I quite a bit. Not for a while, but I guess a few years ago, he led the Eldraine team that I was on and the Theros Beyond Death team. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, still here today. He's super smart, great at solving things, a fantastic designer, been here for ages. Next up is Scott Larrabee, who is also on the design team. Now, Scott, if you're not familiar, is part of the Commander Rules Committee, as in he's works with Sheldon and Toby Elliott and Gavin Dugan on managing the rules of the format. But he's the only one of them that works at Wizards. So it was really important to have him on this team to kind of lay the groundwork to make sure that everything was working well between the two, right? That it would make sense for Commander to gel with whatever cards we're making here. Scott's still on design teams to this day. In fact, I've worked with him on a number of recent projects. In fact, I just saw Scott yesterday doing a Commander playtest in the office. I was just there for work, but he was there just playtesting one of the more recent Commander products. Yeah, and I worked with Scott on on some upcoming stuff, which is pretty exciting too. So yeah, you've worked on him with some stuff. I've worked on him with some stuff. So he's pretty cool. Here's a name that you might not know, though. Did you ever overlap with Ryan Miller? Does that name ring a bell for you? So I've never overlapped with him, but I know who he is. He was a Duel Masters guy, right? Is that the guy I'm thinking of? Yeah. Okay. So Ryan Miller worked on another card game we make at Wizards called Duel Masters, and he did some Magic stuff too. And he was always coming up with cool new formats. If you are one of the 26 people out there who played the Wizards Tower variant that showed up in our bundles, that was something Ryan came up with, and he was always coming up with new cool ideas and fun social play, casual play stuff. So it made a lot of sense for him to be on this team. He's since left. He's working at another game design company now. But yeah, great guy. And then to round out the design team, here's another name that you'll probably recognize, might be surprised was on the team, Mark Purvis. Okay, yep. Yeah, he is you can say what his actual title is, because I honestly don't know, but I remember him as a brand manager. I know his title's different now, but anyway, you might as well say who he is, because I'm going to say it wrong. I know it. Yeah, he is. He is very high up in the Wizards organization. He is, I don't want to call him a director, because I don't know if that's actually correct given his last promotion. But the long and short of it is he helps manages a lot of the product side. So he does product and marketing, and he used to be my manager for a while. So if you're listening to this, Mark, sorry, I don't remember your exact title currently. I can actually look it up. Yep. I don't want to get this wrong. But he does a lot of working on upcoming products, figuring out how they're going to layer into the wider Magic ecosystem. He very seldom does actually design work, but he does layer on every now and then, does come onto a design team to kind of flex his chops a little bit. All right, his current title is, check this out, Senior Director of Global Brand Strategy and Marketing. So if that doesn't sound important, I don't know what does. Yeah, that is a lot of important words you just said. Yeah, so he is a director at Wizards. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. And he works at the very top levels of where we work, Studio X, some other folks outside call it R&D sometimes, to come up with the best release plans for our projects, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, he worked on this set. Okay, so that was the design team. Now we'll go into the development team. So the development team was led by Mark Globus, who also was my manager for a while. He no longer works at Wizards. He's gone on to, I think, just do his own thing, which is great. He's done a little bit of contract work for us since he left, but kind of gone on to do his own thing. He's great. He always had a penchant for figuring out like the best way to make a product. He was the original product architect. I think you might know that for a while I did product architecture. That was a thing that Globus kind of led up and helped make sure that our products all aligned with each other. And he always had a lot of great ideas about sets. And he's had a lot of fun stories about Commander too. He helped kind of bring some of this early stuff into reality, as you see by him leading this. A name you probably don't know, maybe you do, is Peter Knudsen. Do you know who this person is?
I've heard the name, but no, I don't know who he is.
Yeah, I believe, if I remember right, he was an intern at Wizards. He was there for, I think, a year, maybe less. And he was, I believe, the youngest person to ever work in Wizards. He was like, I started when I was 21. I think he even beat me. He was like 28 or something like that. So he's coming hot off of school, came in. I think it was just for a year. I could be misremembering. Sorry, Peter, if you're listening to this. But we've talked a number of times. Really cool guy. Now, here's a name that you will be shocked to learn is on this team, Melissa. Okay. And
all right, let's hear it.
On the development team for the first ever Commander decks, we had Eric Lauer.
Okay.
So,
yeah, he does not strike me as somebody who would be interested in working on multiplayer products, but they probably just like needed somebody to like kind of like rein things in and like, you know, kind of keep things a little balanced. So that makes sense that he did it. But yeah, definitely shocked to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, Eric is a complete genius, amazing to work with. I have learned so much from Eric. He designed original Innistrad, designed Return to Ravnica, just tons of sets. I can't name all. There's way too many sets that he's led design, but it's tons and tons. He's still leading lots of sets. Yeah, to this day, like one of the smartest people I've ever had the opportunity to work with. But often when I think of multiplayer, Eric is not the name that I go to, right? He also comes off of a competitive background, all this kind of stuff. So when I was actually looking through the design notes for this, I was like really surprised, like, oh, Eric worked on these decks. But him and I talked a little bit before this show started, and he was kind of there, like you said, to help make sure things stayed on track and to help relay best development principles into what was happening at the time. Once again, we have Ryan Miller on the development team. Often we keep one person as a through line between design and development. And then rounding things out was Lee Sharp. Lee now works on our digital teams, been at Wizards for a very long time as well, loves attacking. So some of that is embodied there for sure. And also has loved Commander. Lee is also a longtime judge. So he was there as Commander was blowing up, which makes a lot of sense. Yep.
I've known Lee for a long time. I didn't realize he did any design work. So learned something new today.
There you go. Well, let's talk about something else that you might be learning for the first time. And I would imagine that not only you're learning this for the first time, Melissa, but I don't know if we've ever told this story before. And this is a pretty big story. And I'm going to tell it here for everyone for the first time. Do you know why Commander, the original decks, was codenamed Bedlam, as opposed to every other Commander release after it, which was codenamed Commander 2013, 2014, and so on?
No idea.
Well, originally, this was not going to be a Commander product. This was going to be something else. They were working on, the idea was to do a multiplayer casual draft format. So they were working on making a draft experience. It was going to be a set, like you would pick it up, you would draft it, and it had cards in there for Two-Headed Giant play and Emperor play and Commander play. And basically it's like, hey, if you play multiplayer, draft this thing. It was coming out during this promotion we used to run called the Summer of Multiplayer. So it was like, whatever kind of multiplayer game you like, here's a set for you, draft it, have fun, play free for all Magic, and then give it a try. And they worked down this path for a very long time. Like most of the entire design team, at least I'd say half of it, given what folks were saying to me, was spent going down this path. And they were having a real hard time cracking the nut of this format. And, I talked to Scott Larrabee, and he told me that basically the verdict came down. They had until X date to get it into shape to be like, hey, this is, we have something we think is going to work, or they were just going to do Commander decks instead. Commander decks were like their fallback, as it were.
A fallback.
Yeah, a fallback. And as Scott Larrabee told me, he's like, well, once they told us that, me and some others on the team started losing a lot less interest in making this set good because we just wanted to do Commander decks. And of course, Scott, being from the rules committee, was like, yeah, of course, Commander decks. That sounds sweet. That sounds awesome. So, of course, it came to pass that the what they're working on didn't pan out. They ended up making Commander decks instead. And as Mark Gottlieb told me, to quote him exactly, pivoting the entire format in the middle of design is one of the most radical mid-design changes he has ever seen, right? Imagine being like, hey, you're leading a booster draft set. Just kidding, you're actually going to lead a Commander deck now, right? That's such a different world to be living in.
Yeah, definitely, yep.
So that was pretty wild, and they had to pivot really quickly to make that work. And of course, they had a lot of common and uncommon designs that didn't end up making the cut. Scott Larrabee actually showed me a bunch of them. We'll get into talking about those maybe a little bit later. It's amazing. He still has the files around. It was really cool to chat with him about it. I think it's cool that eventually, though, we did crack that nut. Sean Main would crack it many years later with Conspiracy, where he kind of found the juice to make it all come together. And part of the initial thing with Conspiracy when Sean pitched it was people remembered back, oh, yeah, we tried to make that work. Maybe now we know enough to make it actually happen. So that was kind of cool. So they started working on the decks. There was a lot of room to explore, like tons of design space there to figure out. And Ken Nagel was told basically, do whatever you want. You can make new cards, try and make it happen. The only rule he told me that Aaron Forsyth, of course, Aaron, if you don't know, is a director at Wizards of the Coast, kind of the big boss for a lot of us. Brilliant guy. And also very matter of fact, which is why when I say this next part, it will make sense. According to Ken, these are Ken's words exactly, Aaron said, make sure every deck has Soul Ring so we don't look like idiots. Because Soul Ring is the most powerful card in the format. So that's why Soul Ring was put in all of them, which still stands true to this day. And hopefully we don't look like idiots too often. So that's kind of some of that history. Any thoughts on that? Anything that strikes you as interesting there, Melissa?
Right. So the multiplayer format thing, like, that's just wild to me because, like, I never really considered multiplayer a very popular format, even though I have played lots of Magic. But whenever anybody played multiplayer, it was just Commander. It was never anything. It was never like Grand Melee or like, I don't know. I guess back in the day we played Emperor, but like multiplayer really, in my mind, has started like dying down, and then Commander started ramping up as the multiplayer format. So it was just a little bit weird that they were doing this multiplayer format and didn't even start with Commander in the first place.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a pitch. Like it was suggested. I think Gottlieb had it as like original suggestion, but it's not what they went with. And so that's why when they had to pivot, they're like, well, we got this in our back pocket. It's what we didn't ultimately end up using. So that was kind of cool and quite interesting. It's coming off of Plane Chase and Arch Enemy in the previous couple years, which did
That's
fine.
Right. Yep.
It did fine.
That's what you meant by the multiplayer, the summer of multiplayer. Yeah, I do remember playing both Plane Chase and Arch Enemy. And then eventually we just incorporated those things into Commander games. So I played a decent amount of Plane Chase with Commander decks.
Yeah, I played Plane Chase with Commander, I played Arch Enemy Commander, and later we would go through and play, we'd do Arch Enemy Nicol Bolas to revisit it. We'd also do Plane Chase 2, but nothing had the staying power of Commander decks, as we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, we were kind of just like every year, let's try out a new multiplayer format, and Arch Enemy did okay. Plane Chase did okay, and then Commander was the clear winner of the bunch, and really took off. Now these decks were 3-color Wedge decks. Now, if you had to guess, Melissa, why do you think they were 3-color Wedge decks?
Well, so my guess is, in their mind, this was the only Commander product that they were ever going to do, because who knows if it would be popular, who knows if it would catch on. So they wanted to give players like lots of options. So like, lots of like multicolored cards, lots of single color cards, just like a lot of like ways to build decks and mix and match and things. And like doing 3-color decks gives you that. So that would be my like off the top of my head guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely in the right ballpark there for sure. I was talking with Gottlieb about this, and basically the feeling at the time was that, they had done Shards of Alara, and Shards of Alara was a bit of a rocky road. Like, the enfranchised players really enjoyed it, but a lot of newer players found it very challenging. The mana bases were hard to make work. 3-color mana is always really hard. And it didn't like do as well as I think folks wanted it to do. And so the idea was we would probably not ever do another Wedge set, right? So we'd never do a Wedge set. So it was like, well, we better make Wedge Commanders to make those folks happy. Additionally, Wedge was just very under-supported. There was the Shards of Alara stuff for the Shards, but the Wedges didn't really have anything going. Now, as Mark Gottlieb kind of argued against, he's like, look, I know you say now you're not going to do a Wedge set, but someday I imagine we'll do one, and we should we should hold out some stuff for that. So actually, fun fact, the Wedge tri-lands, like Nomad Outpost and whatever, were originally in this product because they were like, yeah, we're never gonna do a Wedge set. We should just make all the enemy colored like Wedge cycles that we didn't do in Shards of Alara, or the mirror Shards of Alara here. And Gottlieb successfully argued, let's really hold that stuff back because someday we're going to do the Wedge set. We're going to want to have the tri-lands and stuff like that for those. So actually the lands turned into command tower. They're like, okay, well, fine. We won't do 5 lands. We won't do all 5 of the Wedge lands. We'll just make one sweet land. And they made command tower instead, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's also kind of funny to me, and I think you might have been around for this, is that the same exact refrain happened with Tarkir, right? I was around for when Tarkir was at Wizards. Tarkir came out, and afterwards it was like, that set was great, worked out really, really well. A lot of the franchise players loved it, but man, 3-color was hard. We will never do 3-color again. We got to put the kibosh on any future 3-color stuff. And then, of course, you wait long enough and we do Ikoria, right? Which is a set with a lot of 3-color elements to it. We've announced that the upcoming Streets of New Capenna has some 3-color stuff going on in it as well. So, it turns out you just wait long enough, you'll do the 3-color stuff. So
I was actually not at Wizards during Cons of Tarkir. I was a player. It was actually my last set before joining Wizards. But I loved Cons of Tarkir. It was my last Pro Tour. And also I top 8'd the GP of that year. Basically the last GP I played, I made top 8 and then played in Pro Tour Cons of Tarkir and then came to Wizards pretty soon after. But I remember loving just the 3-color sets in general and being like, oh, they finally did Wedge sets. So it's very interesting that you're telling me that they weren't considered doing it before because I was waiting for it as a player.
That was GP Orlando, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I was there. I remember that. That was awesome.
Cool. Yep.
So I mean, I think just Wedge sets have this very strange paradigm where enfranchised players who've been playing a long time really love them because it gives them interesting tools. They get the challenge of building a mana base, all that kind of stuff. Often the draft environments have a lot of interesting hooks you can make work. But from a design standpoint, they can be quite challenging where it's you have to figure out how to make 3-color mana bases work. A lot of newer players are going to have trouble with it. And you end up with the problem that Shards of Alara had where in limited, it was so often did you draw your mana fixing, right? Did you hit your 3 colors? Because if so, you win it. If not, you're going to lose. And we ended up fixing that in pretty smart ways from Eric Lauer in Cons of Tarkir with the common tap duels, for example, which did a lot of really great work. But yeah, or go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, also Morph is if you don't draw your 3rd color, at least you still have spells to play, right? Because you can just use colorless mana for Morph. So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, Morph in Cons of Tarkir and then cycling in Shards of Alara was trying to do the same thing. And so, I think at the time, I remember after Cons of Tarkir, I tried pitching some 3-color stuff and everyone was like, no way, right? We're not going to do this. But then, of course, give it enough time and we're back. We did it in Ikoria. It worked out pretty great. Players loved it. So I think it's not off the table. So that's why we did 3 colors there. Okay, now let's go through the 5 decks. Okay, so first up, we have Heavenly Inferno. This is red, white, and black. Okay, so I'm going to list off the commanders. You tell me if you know these ones. So the first one is Kaalia of the Vast. Do you know this one? Yeah,
sort of. I don't remember what it does, but I know that it's a human creature that cares about demons, angels, and dragons.
Right, so yeah, it's a 1 red, white, black flying creature. And whenever it attacks, you just put a free demon, dragon, or angel onto the battlefield, tapped or attacking, which is pretty hot as it turns out.
Yeah, actually, I do remember when I was saying before, my play group all bought precons. The Kaalia one was the least appealing to me because I just wanted blue cards. I definitely remember that. But the Kaalia player, the person who bought this deck, crushed everybody. It was just so powerful. Just all these free dragons, and we just had our fluster storms, and we were like, I don't know what to do here. But yeah, he won a lot of games.
Even now, Kaalia still see a lot of playing Commander, right? I mean, it was a great card, super exciting. It is basically kill on sight. If you don't kill it right away, you're like, uh-oh, next turn's going to be a problem. But yeah, it's still popular to this day. And that goes in with the theme of the deck. This deck is all about big flying creatures. You've got your demons and your dragons and your angels running around. You've got the backup commander, Teriel. Do you remember this one?
I don't know this one.
All right, so Teriel, designed by Mark Purvis. He actually wrote a great article talking about this. Mark Purvis was kind of the person working on this deck. Teriel is 4, a white, a black, and a red for a 4/7 flying vigilance angel. Tap, choose a creature card at random from target opponent's graveyard. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So you kind of could every turn take something from an opponent's graveyard, What were you going to get? Who knows? But you're going to get something out of it. So
yeah, and instant speed. So it's like, oh, you're attacking me? All right, well, I'll target your graveyard and let's see what I get. And, maybe I might ambush your guy, but at the very least, I'm going to get something and block your thing for free. Yeah, this can be powerful.
Yeah. 7 mana, right? But it is the kind of thing that often these days would probably put a limiter on of sorcery speed or, something like that maybe.
Or enters tapped, because just the play pattern of I get your thing after you attack me, it's just like huge like decision paralysis for the attacker. It's like, oh man, what could happen if I attack? So we tend to avoid those types of things these days. So
every deck had 2 brand new commanders, and they had a third card in them. And do you remember what the third card that was a reprint which could command the deck was?
No idea.
These were, of course, the Planar Chaos Dragons. So these were all the Wedge dragons, the inverse invasion ones.
I did know that. Yeah.
There were some of the very, very, very few Wedge legends that existed at that point. There were not many of them. And so this had the red, white, black one, who was called, do you remember?
Oh my God. All right. So let's see. There was Newmont was the Jeskai one. There was, began with a V was the Sultai one. Varosh, is that right?
Vorosh, yeah.
Oh, so close. Let's see. I think that's an Amonkhet card. I've learned that as time goes on, I get much worse at remembering card names because, oh man, we have so many card names working at Wizards. They change so many times. So to like save brain space, I just don't remember card names anymore. So having a hard time remembering this one. But once you tell me, I'm sure I'll remember it.
Whenever someone introduces themselves to me, I always feel like I have to make the choice between like remembering their name or deleting like 15 Mirage commons from my memory, right? It's like I only have so much room for this stuff. So the red, white, black one is Oros the Avenger.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
It's a 6 mana, 6/6 flyer. They all are. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can pay 2 and a white. If you do, Oros deals 3 damage to each non-white creature. So there's that.
I do remember that these dragons all mirrored the original invasion dragons, like Dromar, Croesus,
Rith. You can't forget Rith, right?
How could I forget Rith? The Brian Kibler special. How could I forget him?
You've got Daragaz, of course.
Yep, because that one was in Dominaria.
And then Treva.
A new version. Treva, yep.
Treva being the one no one remembers because it gained you like 1 life for every permanent of the color. So
yeah, but the interesting thing about those, and we are way on a tangent here, but those it cared about colors of things on the battlefield, and we just don't make cards like that anymore, caring about your opponent's stuff. Like usually we would just say that you control. Like it's just kind of weird that like your opponent is punished because they happen to be playing green.
Oh man, I was listening to the Receivables, actually, shameless plug again, on Invasion, and they're talking about like the Jin cycle where like they get -2/-2 if their color is the greatest represented color among all permanents on the battlefield. And I'm just like, oh man, I forgot about these. That was a nightmare.
They were powerful limited cards. Like, yeah, I remember these like from limited very distinctly because like if you were splashing them, they were super powerful. But if you were just playing them, like if you're playing the red Jin in your red deck, it was probably going to be weak. I remember splashing the blue one a lot.
Weird times. Anyway, a little bit of a tangent there, but we're allowed to do that. This is a long podcasty style show, so we get to go on some fun tangents and tell stories. That's why I wanted to do it this way. Additionally, so this deck had its 3 commanders, 2 new ones, 1 reprint, but this did something that was interesting as well, which we would eventually stop doing, then restart doing, which we'll get to eventually, which is 1 commander that could not command the deck, but was the 2 enemy colors of the commander. So in the case of this deck, that is Basandra, Battle Seraph, who is 3 red white for a 4/4 flying angel. Players can't cast spells during combat, and red target creature attacks this turn if able. So that was kind of the one we did here. Some of these are more successful than others. I'd say Basandra, some folks play it. It's kind of forgettable. There's a few others we'll get to in a moment that we're a little more saucy, we'll say. Fun fact about Teriel, there's, like I said, a great article by this on Mark Purvis online. The card almost didn't change the entire way through design, from when he designed it all the way through final printing. Teriel's the one where you can put a random creature into play under your control. So that's kind of cool. Other than that, red, white, black deck full of big creatures. You've got some huge angels. You've got like Angel of Despair. You've got a Chroma, Angel of Fury. You've got Malfagor, a Demon Dragon. So, all kinds of fun stuff. Let's go on to the next deck. This is Mirror Mastery. This is the red, blue, green deck. Do you remember who commanded this deck, Melissa?
So my guess is it's Riku. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the card that I remember is Animar.
Yeah, well, you nailed it. Those are the two commanders for this deck. Do you remember what Riku and Animar both do?
Yeah, all right, let's see. So Riku cares about copying, it copies your creatures and your spells. Like you can pay like blue to copy your spell probably, and maybe you pay green to copy your creature, something along those lines. I could have gotten them backwards.
Yeah, pretty much perfect.
It does something like that.
Riku of 2 reflections, 2 green, blue, red for a 2/2 human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you can pay blue, red to copy that spell. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay green, blue and create a token that's a copy of that creature. So for 2 mana, basically, whenever you do something, you can just do it again. So that's pretty sweet. This card is still sweet today. Like this card is awesome. Huge fan of Riku of 2 reflections. And how about Animar?
Yeah, Animar I am more familiar with because I remember I really liked this card. So it costs green, blue, red. I believe it starts off as a 1/1, but it gets bigger. It's like whenever you cast a creature spell, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And your creatures cost 1 less per counter on this, or power, one of the two. But the thing that is the most offensive about this card is it has protection from white and black.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up if you didn't. So yeah, your creatures cost 1 less for each +1/+1 counter on it. This to me is very offensive. Like I like Animar. I think it's a sweet card, like otherwise, except for this line. But why protection from white and black? That's just so brutal. It's like, here's my 3 mana commander, which I'm doing a totally fair, reasonable thing with that grows over time. Also, if you're playing like white or black, I'm just going to crush you.
Yeah, my guess is the designers were like, okay, how can we make the most teamer commander possible? What's the most teamer abilities we can put on this card? I know. How about it really, really hates colors that are not itself, right? Yeah. Oh man, I remember like this card was played in my play group a lot as a commander, and it was super frustrating. Like if I ever decided to bring a white or black deck to the table, I was like, really, come on, Animar, why does it do that?
I imagine you just sit down for like your 5-player commander game because you bought all 5 of these decks, and someone shuffles up Animar and you're playing the red, white, black deck, and you're just like, dude, what gives? What's up with this? Yeah, that's brutal.
And
card.
This card is like, other than protection for white and black, like let's say that you just remove that from the card. This card is super powerful. Like, right. Yes, you have to build around it, but wow, it's powerful. It gives you mana and it gets bigger. And then the protection from white and black just is practically unblockable.
Yeah, this is something that we are careful about today in design, which I always call like command zone frowns, which is when you shuffle up or when you all sit down to play a game of Commander and you each have your commander, you pull it out, and immediately before you've even drawn your opening hand, you're like, well, I don't know if I even want to play this deck, right? Because you're playing your white-black deck and then someone flips over Animar and you're just like, well, I just want to change my deck. I don't even want to do this anymore. Or similar, yep. Like we often try to not make commanders that do like really good graveyard hate, because then it's like, oh, I'm playing my Sidisi deck and someone just flips over their graveyard hate card. Well, that sucks. I can't even like play my game. So Animar, a little offensive, gotta say, to me, this first ability. But once again, it was 10 years ago. We didn't know what we were doing. So there's that. Yep. We've got, of course, Intet the Dreamer as the third dragon there. Yep. Yeah, Intet the Dreamer, whose ability, same structure as the previous dragons. Its special ability is when you hit your opponent, you can pay 2 and a blue to exile the top card of your library, and you can look at and play it for as long as it remains exiled. So kind of get a free spell whenever you connect with that one. Yeah, so then do you remember what the 2-color legend is for this deck, Melissa? Because this is a big one.
No, I can't even begin to tell you. What is it?
The 2-color legend is green-blue. Does that help? Costs 1 green-blue.
It's Edric.
It is. Right? It is indeed Edric. This card was the bonus legend in this deck and has gone on to maybe be one of the like more powerful commander legends from this cycle, right? Like, yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, I remember being excited about this card for Legacy and just adding blue to like just green elf decks. But I thought this card was great. I remember picking up this deck because I wanted that card.
Yeah,
not for Commander.
Edric, very powerful. It's gone on to be huge. You know, there's the very silly deck some folks build and then take apart because no one wants to play with them anymore. There's like all 1-drops and time walks and Edric, which is so ridiculous, right? You're just like play some 1-drops, play Edric, draw a bunch of cards, cast time walk, attack, draw another time walk, cast time walk, attack, draw another time walk. Of course, using like time warps and temporal manipulation or whatever as your different time walks. So that's kind of a bummer. But it excited a lot of people, and the card did good work there. I'll say that as a deck, this, you know, first year of Commander decks were kind of all over the place. The first deck had a very tight theme, right? It was that red, white, black flying deck with angels and dragons and demons. This deck is like, you know, some creatures that you can copy with your Commander that are sweet. You've got like Aether Snipe and Nuclavy, you know, stuff that's cool to copy. But it doesn't really have like a tight theme, I would say. It's just like, yeah, you know, copy your stuff with Riku, or play Animar and cast your spells, I guess.
Yep. Value creatures, cast them for cheaper.
Yeah. Coming up next, we've got Counterpunch. Bam, bam. This is the white, black, green deck. Do you remember the commander for this deck?
All right, let's see. Is it Gave or Gave or Gav? Is it one of those things? Am I saying it right?
Yes, you nailed it. And to this day,
I nailed it.
People still don't know how it's pronounced, but you got it correct. Yeah, we've got Gave, Guru of Spores, who is 2 white, black, green for a 0/0 fungus shaman. But he enters with 5+1/+1 counter, so that'll help him stay alive. You can pay 1 and remove a counter to make a sapperling, or pay 1 and sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So get some counters himself, can move him around for sapperlings, can make sapperling tokens. Lots of infinite combos available with this card, so that's pretty rough. This card is a little bit mathy, for sure.
I remember liking the card. I don't remember if I bought this deck, but I remember, like, you know, like, our playgroup bought all the decks pretty much, and I remember I thought that it was interesting.
Yeah, it definitely interesting. It has some cool synergies in the deck and outside of the deck, for that matter. We've got next up is Carador. Do you remember this one?
The name definitely sounds familiar, but I have to look this one up. I'll know it when I see it, though.
I think this is one of the first previews on for Commander. I think it was on the Commander website itself. I do remember when the website launched. Yeah.
Yeah, this card is pretty awesome, actually. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, if you build around this card and play a bunch of self-mill, like, yeah, this card can be really powerful.
This card totally rocks. It's 5 black, green, white for a 3/4 Centaur Spirit. It costs 1 less for every creature card in your graveyard, and during each of your turns, you get to cast a creature card from your graveyard. You gotta pay its cost still, but this to me was a very eye-opening card for me because it cuts down your commander tax, right? It's very clever, and like, yeah, you can pay it for cheaper the first time, but also it scales up as the game goes along. So it's very, very clever design in that sense of, oh, you've got 10 creatures in your bin. Well, it still will cost you less even with the command tax added, which I think is pretty cool.
Definitely super cool cost there. The casting cards from your graveyard, that one can be a little bit oppressive, I think. Like if you have a sack owl, you can just play the same creature over and over, and then the game just becomes super repetitive. Like, if we were to redesign this today, we would add some kind of exile clause here. I would guess, like, we just don't do this anymore.
Yeah, a lot of the time we have some line that's like, give it a corpse counter, and when it dies, exile it.
Yeah, because
Isarath, right? Or Gyrus or whatever. It's fun to do this kind of thing. It's fun to loop your creatures out of your graveyard or get them back out of your graveyard. But like looping the same creature every turn can be very frustrating and lead to some pretty unfun game states. So still a sweet card. Definitely can be a little bit loopy. And then of course, to round it out, we've got the dragon. We've got Teneb, who is like the other 6 mana 6/6. When it hits your opponent, you can pay 2 and a black to get a creature from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So steal their stuff. This one was fun in multiplayer too, because you could like attack a different player depending on what was in their graveyard. So that's kind of neat.
Cool.
And then, do you remember the 2-color commander for this one? And honestly, a lot of the other ones I did remember. I had to look this one up. Okay. I forgot about this.
Okay, so tell me if this is the right card, because because like I said, I don't really know. You know, I can't differentiate one commander product from the next. Is it Skullbriar?
No. Skullbriar is in these commander decks. We'll get there in a second.
But that's not the one.
It is not in this deck, right? This, the one in this deck is Vishkal.
That does not ring a bell.
Yeah, I had to look this one up. It's 4 white, black, black for a 5/5 vampire. It's got flying. It's got lifelink. You can sacrifice a creature to give it X+1/+1 counters, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. And you can remove all of its +1/+1 counters to give a creature -1/-1 until end of turn for each counter you remove. So it's both a sack outlet, and also you can use it to just machine gun down your opponent's creatures.
Spell. Yep. Interesting. So first of all, a lot of interesting. I don't even know if interesting is the word I want to use here. Weird stuff. You have to remove all the counters. Right. So you don't even have the option of like removing some if you want to just kill a 1/1. So that makes you not want to sacrifice many creatures. You usually want to just do sack 1, remove the counters, sack another, remove the counters. So that's a little weird. And also, I don't know, like not a very memorable card. I don't think like we can do sack outlets way better than this.
Yeah, also, I will say it's mostly not memorable, but it's also a little bit spooky in that you can just sack a creature to give it counters on a flyer at instant speed anytime, because it's so easy to just kill someone out of nowhere with this card, right? You attack, they don't block, You're like, well, it's my commander, 21 commander damage kills you, count up the power on my other creatures, do I want to just shove it over and kill you off? So that's kind of weird too to me.
Yeah, like my guess is that like the design team just wanted to just really push these because they had no idea if they were making any more of these, right? So it's just kind of like, all right, well, how do we make sure that we're just like making awesome creatures that are more powerful than something you'd find in a standard set, is my guess.
And there's some counters matter stuff here. We've got, Spike Feeder, which can move counters around. We've got Aquastrand Spider, actually, to move some counters around to help put counters on stuff. But it's kind of a weird mix between a graveyard deck and a +1/+1 counter deck. And I actually have a good story about that we'll get to in a second. But first, we got to get through another deck, which is Political Puppets. This is the blue-red-white deck. It has its commanders as Zedru as its face. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, definitely. This is probably like one of the more famous commanders to this day that people still play a lot of. Is it a 5-mana 2/4 or a 4-mana 2/4?
4-mana 2/4, yeah.
Okay. And every turn you can give something to your opponent, and then you can you draw cards equal to the amount of things that your opponents have of yours, right?
Yeah, pretty close. It's 1 red, white, blue for a 2/4 Minotaur Monk. Although I'll admit it does not look like much of a Minotaur in the artwork. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control. And you can pay a red, a white, and a blue to just give away a permanent. Just give it away. This to me was the card that I saw, and I'm like, okay, something different is happening here. Like a lot of the other cards, you go in a standard set, and you're like, okay, I kind of see what's happening. Like maybe a little weird, whatever. This card and the other commander too, I saw, and I was like, oh, this is different. This is multiplayer. Yeah. And I think it was important to kind of show off this was a different feeling thing. It wasn't just about one-on-one play. And this card is a blast. And there's so many fun things you can do with it. Giving away auras or giving away, of course, bad things to your opponents. This captured folks' imaginations like right away. I love this card.
Yeah, when I first saw this, my thoughts were pretty much the same as yours. I was like, oh, this is different from anything I would ever think about in like a tournament format. Right. And I had no idea what to do with this. 10 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like really focused on competitive. So this is like just a very new world to me. And I like usually when I look at cards, I can like imagine what kind of decks I can go in. This, I just had no idea what to do. I was like, well, what do you mean give stuff away? Why would I want to give my stuff away? Right. And then when I played against it, they're like, oh, you can get my aura. Oh, you can get my crappy thing that's about to die. And it's like, oh, chump block. Oh, but now you get it. And it was just like super interesting. It was like, oh, I've never thought about Magic in this sense before. So very eye-opening.
Right. I think it was someone like Journey to Nowhere my creature and then gave the Journey of Nowhere to me. And I was like, huh.
It's like, why would I want this? Yeah, it's super cool.
Pretty cool. So then that was the front-facing commander. The backup commander also did a great job to me. Do you remember Ruhan of the Fomori?
I do not.
Oh, delightful Magic card.
Of that person.
Yeah, Ruhan.
This one does not look familiar. Well, a 7/7 for 4. Let's see what this does.
Yeah, so it's a 1 red, white, blue 7/7 giant warrior. And every turn it attacks a random opponent. So every one of your turns, it attacks somebody, but you're never sure who. And this card was so much fun because like a lot of times you don't want to make enemies in Commander. And you're just like, look, it's not my fault I attacked you. Just like the game chose it to be that way, And to me, I thought that was an awesome aspect of this political deck. So these are two that are awesome. Ruhan is like definitely a lot weaker than a lot of cards we make these days. But even now, I still see some folks play with this card sometimes.
And hey, if you're playing 1-on-1, you just get a 4-mana 7/7, which is
I remember,
okay.
Yeah, right. I remember at the time, some folks put this in their cube. They're like, maybe it'll be a cubable card. It's just a 4-mana 7/7. Don't think I quite made the cut, but yeah. And then lots of fun political stuff in here. Just so much cool stuff you can do politically to pass stuff around the table. And of course, plenty of walls so you don't get attacked. Stuff like Death by Dragons, where everybody but one player got a huge creature token.
Yeah, I remember that card.
Lots of fun there. Okay, now let's go into the last deck, Devour for Power, which is a name that I've always loved. It's black, blue, green. That's the last one we haven't covered. It has the Mimeoplasm as its face commander. Yep. Do you know this one?
Yeah, I do. I believe I bought this deck. Okay, hold on. Let me try and describe what it does. So when it enters the battlefield, you're going to exile some creatures from your graveyard. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, you're on the right track.
Yeah, all right. Then I think I know what it does now. All right, so it'll like copy its one of its power, one of its toughness, and one of its abilities, right?
Pretty close. Right? When it enters, you exile 2 creatures from any graveyard, which is relevant. You can hit other players' graveyards too. It comes into play as a copy of one with +1/+1 counters of the other. So if you copy, I don't know, I'm gonna pick 2 random creatures, Skithiryx the Blight Dragon and a Colossal Dreadmaw, you can get a 10/10 Skithiryx the Blight Dragon, which of course you can then give Infect and Haste 2, which is very good at killing off your opponent's faces.
Yep.
Yeah, Mimeoplasm, another huge hit from this first series of decks. People loved this card. And I think like the interchangeability, the flexibility, the ability to combine things together really made this card charming and lovable.
Yeah, this card was pretty awesome. I remember enjoying playing this deck a lot.
Also, the next backup commander was Damia, Sage of Stone.
I don't remember this one.
Yeah, so Damia is a cool Gorgon. It's 4 black, green, blue, 4/4 Death Touch. Skip your draw step. So we're not starting off high.
Why would I want to do that?
It's going to be okay, though, because at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have fewer than 7 cards, you draw cards equal to the difference. So basically, every turn you just reset set to 7 cards, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, this card I remember seeing was like, that's sweet. I think some folks put that in their cube. It might have even been in like the Magic Online cube for a little while. Very exciting card. And one thing you'll notice about a lot of these commanders too is they're a little higher up on the curve, right? A lot of these days we see cheaper commanders because the format has kind of evolved to be a little cheaper commander focused over time. But a lot of these early ones are 5, 6, 7, 8 drops.
Yeah, I'm noticing that. Yeah, like I guess my thought is they just felt that 7 mana was like the right time to be casting your commander back then. So like my guess is how they expected people to play commander is you're playing your singleton deck. And then way later on, when you have run out of stuff to do, now you get this commander, is like kind of what I'm getting at by seeing all these 7 mana cards.
Yeah, there were just fewer commander options. So naturally, you're going to have a wider spread of like, well, I want to play these colors. These are the only commanders I have available. They're going to be high mana costs. So a lot of folks were doing that. And then additionally, it was slower back then. And people hadn't optimized the format. Like mana rocks weren't a thing as much. There were played some, but it wasn't like, okay, most decks start off with mana rocks. There wasn't as much information about the format like there is now. So, and it was just slower, right? It's 10 years, fewer of cards that had been printed. And
fewer build around commanders, right? Like this card is just super generic. It's just like, it is a expensive creature with a keyword. And it draws cards. That's it. There's no like deck building requirement, no payoff. It's just you just get a 7 mana 4/4, and if it survives for a turn, you'll get some cards. Like super generic. These days, we make more commanders that are like more like heavy build arounds, like super niche, and just do like a lot more interesting and weirder things, and way lower on the curve.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of that is because, one, you want to have your commander early so you can synergize with your stuff, right? If you built your coin flipping deck or something, you want to be able to actually make the coin flip cards you cast matter. And second of all, like you said, we are so precious about trying to make cards that are more niche than everywhere. Because, for example, Damia, of course, costs 7 mana, doesn't get played a ton these days. But if it was like a 4 mana commander, which is ridiculous, but let's pretend it was for a second.
Sure.
It would get played over most other green, blue, black commanders. That would push out a lot of innovation. So we're very careful about making like good stuff style commanders. And we've had, a few in recent years. I think like the Brawl decks are maybe some of the biggest offenders with Corvold and Shoelane and some of those guys who show up a little more often than we would like. But they had a different target, right? I mean, you were the lead designer on those. And
we have learned a lot. Brawl. Yeah, we've learned a ton since then. Like, Yeah, we thought Brawl was going to catch on and be a real format, and we wanted to make awesome cards for Brawl. So different goals. But we have learned a lot about like the repercussions of, if you design something for a format, but it's also legal in this other format that's way more popular. You have to be very careful about that. So we've learned our lessons, and we're hopefully doing a much better job now.
Yeah, looking ahead to the next year of Commander, a lot of the commanders are a lot more niche, which I think is a good place to be. So a fun story about this deck, and kind of what I was alluding to earlier with the Counterpunch deck, is if you look at the themes of this deck, it's kind of like you were just asking this question yourself, like what is the theme of this deck? What is going on in this blue-black-green deck? It's got some graveyard with the Mimeoplasm, but wasn't Carador also doing a graveyard thing? Like what was happening there? And what happened is at one point, and I don't know how early or late it was, but I was being told by Gottlieb that at one point the white-green-black deck and the blue-black-green deck swapped themes. And originally, green-blue-black was actually Gave. Gave was the commander of that deck. And white-black-green had Carador as its front-facing commander. And of course, blue-black-green at that point was a lot more tokeny and counter-focused. And they basically ended up moving a lot of stuff around, smushing the white-black-green to kind of be both themes, like counters, creatures, and have a bit of graveyard stuff going on. And then this deck ended up with Mimeoplasm and still has some graveyard stuff going on. So it was kind of like moving some stuff around. And I think like between this and the white-black-green deck, they're kind of like one theme or like one general graveyard theme rolling through both of them. That's a little weird. We wouldn't do that today as much. But it was a different time. Stuff got moved around. Also, I'll say that speaking of stuff we don't do as much of anymore, looking through the deck list, there's some things that we just wouldn't do these days. Like one thing we don't do anymore are tutors in our commander decks. And the reason why we don't do that is imagine you sit down to play this deck for the first time, you draw your opening hand, you cast your tutor on turn 3, and you're like, I don't know what's in my deck. Please pause for 10 minutes while I read through every card.
Yep.
And looking in this deck, it had Buried Alive, which I actually remember playing and casting for the first time in this deck and being like, I don't know what I'm going to get. And taking a very long time. So.
Yep. Yeah, I remember like when I was playing Commander way back then, I used to actually borrow a lot of decks because, I don't know, I was playing very competitive Magic, sometimes playing on the Pro Tour. I didn't have time to build my own decks, but I still was playing a lot of Commander back then too. So I mostly borrowed decks. And whenever they had tutors, I would play the tutor and then I'd say, okay, this is your deck. What do I get? Tell me what to get. Instead of just like taking forever to look and figure it out for myself, because I don't know, like if I'm there to make the best play, I'm just going to be there all day figuring out what to do. I don't want to make 3 other people wait for me.
I appreciate the tell me how to beat you line of like, I need to kill you. Like, what do you got in here? You got something good for me? Okay, so then let's get into a card you mentioned a moment ago, the 2-color commander. Oh, of course, let's not forget Vorosh, of course. Vorosh the Hunter, a 6/6 that when it hits your opponent, you can pay 3 mana to get 6 +1/+1 counters. But the thing I wanted to actually talk about was Skullbriar. You mentioned this a moment ago.
Yeah.
Tell me about this one.
This card was very memorable to me. So first I'll say what it does. It's a 2-mana card, 1/1. And it got counters in some way, which I don't remember how exactly. But the novel thing about the card is the counters stay on the creature as it changes zones. So as it dies, it still has its +1/+1 counters. If it goes back to the command zone, it still has its +1/+1 counters. And I remember when I read that for the first time, I was like, oh, wow, like they get to just do all these different things here because they don't have to design for standard. And I just thought that was like super wild. And I was very excited about like things that they were going to come up with in the future with this whole, we are designing cards straight to legacy. So yeah, that was pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, this one blew my mind too. Skullbriar, of course, just to kind of follow up on what Melissa said, black-green for a 1/1 zombie elemental with haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And then, counters remain on Skullbriar as it moves to any zone other than a player's hand or library. So if they bounce it, counters fall off, shuffles back in, counters fall off. But yeah, one of the meanest things you can do, by the way, is give this a -1/-1 counter, and then it's just stuck, and your opponent can't really cast it effectively. So
that's so messed up.
There's that Skullbriar technology. So I was talking with Mark Globus, who was, as we mentioned earlier, the lead developer for these decks, and he told me a pretty fun story, which I think both gives you some good insight into Globus's role, as well as like the whole shape of how a set is made. So Skullbriar was in the stack, and the art came back by Nilsholm. It's an amazing piece of art. And they were like, this art is awesome. We want this card to show up more often. we should give it a little bit more juice because the art is so good that we want it to, people are going to love the art. Let's make sure this is a beloved commander. So they actually added haste to it, mostly because the art was awesome. They wanted it to get played more. So that's just like one of the many things we think about as we're designing Magic cards. It really is about the whole package of a card. And, you know, in retrospect, did it need haste? I don't know that it really needed haste, but it definitely made it see at least some amount more play. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, like it kind of depends because if the goal of this card is to make it the combat damage trigger relevant, then yes, I think it does need haste because waiting an entire turn to untap with it before you get your +1/+1 counter is pretty hard to do. By turn 3, like the table probably has like deployed like a 2/2 creature or something. You can't get this through. However, if you more wanted to build around the the whole counters remain on it, and you're putting cards in your deck that grant counters and other synergies and stuff, then it may not need haste in that regard, but like might want to pick up some other power elsewhere. So it kind of really depends on what the designer's goal is for this card. But I like haste.
So that's a little fun story about Skullbriar, a card that is still loved today. And Globus also told me that to this day, he still maintains a Skullbriar deck. And he loves that we've actually started making keyword counters in Ikoria, which is super cool as a thing that will stay on your Skullbriar that never existed previously. Yeah. But now you can give it flying forever or double strike forever or something, which I think is pretty cool.
Imagine a game of Commander where you have this Skullbriar with all these little pieces of paper with keywords written on it. And it's like, all right, kill that. It's like, okay, let me just like move this over to the side and be careful that the pieces of paper don't fly around.
Right, don't blow too hard or it's all going to be over, right? One of those. Okay, so those are all 5 of the decks. Do you have a favorite out of these 5, Melissa? Like carrying through them, going through the commanders?
Let's see. As for a deck, it's hard to say because I don't exactly remember how they all played. My favorite commander is, without a doubt, Animar. Like, I think that card is awesome to build around. Get rid of that protection thing. Like, he doesn't need that. But just like the card Animar, like the build around of like, a deck where I put all these ETB creatures in my deck, maybe some X-Spell creatures, and then I have this really big payoff of getting to just play a bunch of creatures all in one turn and get a bunch of value is just like super appealing to me. So yeah, Animar. Animar's great.
I can't go wrong with the Temur deck. Riku's great. Animar's a lot of fun. I got to go with political puppets though. Like the red, white, blue Zedru, like as your commander, like blew my mind. That was so cool to me. And to me, from the first series of decks, that is one that will like always stick with me. But of course, fun stuff in all 5 of the decks, and a lot of those cards still get played today. And going through the legends, like I'm impressed. A lot of these designs, there might be a little pricey, or might be a few things that are weird on them, but like this is a really good batch of designs for the first ever Commander series of decks.
Yeah, well, like remember they didn't have to worry about standards, so they could just really kind of go nuts with like interesting things that they don't have to develop. So like I guess I'm not surprised because like I think designing cards for standard, like you really have to put limits on things, and like there are some times when like, oh, if a card is playing out too strong or maybe it's not very fun, then you have to like weaken it, and that can be unsatisfying as a designer. But like for legacy, it's like it's so hard to affect legacy. Like you can pretty much go nuts there. And as the first commander set, like they can just really kind of go wild because who knows if they were going to make any more. Right.
Well, it turns out they'd make many more, but there were a few things that were happening in the first set that were things that ended up being building blocks for future sets or even cycles of things. And I want to get into those now. So there's 51 cards in the set in total. We've covered some of the commanders. I'm not going to go over every single card, but there's a few things I wanted to talk about in particular. The first thing is some of the cycles. And let's talk about the Vows. Do you know all of these?
Yes, I know the Vows. I probably couldn't tell you what each one does, but the gist of it is it's an aura that you put on a creature, and this creature gets big and gets a keyword, but it can't attack you. It was like maybe the first iteration of Goad, right?
It was the precursor to Goad, absolutely. And it ended up playing really well. Let's play a little game. Let's see how many of them you can get right. And, no harm, no foul.
Well, there's been other Vows. Like later on, I'm going to get them confused.
So we'll see how you do. We'll start with Vow of Duty. This is the white Vow.
So there's got to be the white one.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're asking me to say what are its stats?
What are its stats? Yep.
Probably +2/+2.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep. +2/+2.
Vigilance, because it's a white Vow.
Boom.
That's
Got it. +2/+2 in vigilance.
Great.
Did it. Got it.
Okay.
1 for 1. Vow of Flight.
All right. Okay. All right. These are going to be easy. I'm sorry. All right. Vow of Flight, +2/+2 in flying.
Nailed it. Vow of Lightning.
+2/+2 in first strike.
All right. Now here's the hard one.
All right. We got this.
Vow of Malice.
+2/+2 and intimidate.
Boom. Perfect.
Yes.
Vow of Malice, of course, when we reprinted all the other vows in Commander Legends, we switched it out for Vow of Torment, which grants Menace now because we no longer do Intimidate. And then Vow of Wildness.
Okay. +3/+3 and trample.
You're right. You got the trick question. +3/+3 for no, because it's green.
Because it's green. The green one has to be bigger.
So that's what's going on with these. Vow of Wildness grants +3/+3 and trample. So sweet cycle. You put the demonic creature and they can't attack you or a planeswalker you control. They all cost 3 mana, and these were great. Really, really cool. And there's a really fun story behind these cards that I got from both Scott Larrabee and Mark Gottlieb and Ken Nagel as well. So originally when they were designing, even before they came to Commander decks, when they were designing the draft set, Gottlieb had this idea for a mechanic called floating. And what floating did is it was just written on cards, and you could have them enter the battlefield under any player's control. So you would have like a creature that you could either put into play under your control or under another player's control. And if you gave it to someone else, they couldn't attack you. So he made a lot of like what I'll call like sometimes you want them, sometimes other people want them cards. So the example Gottlieb gave me was a Dark Confidant. So sometimes you want Dark Confidant because you want to draw a lot of cards. Sometimes you're like, actually, why don't you take the Dark Confidant and deal a bunch of damage to yourself? So that was one of the designs they came up with. Of course, Dark Confidant, I think I would probably normally keep, but you can imagine a lot of the different variations they came up with.
Yeah, that sounds like actually a really cool mechanic, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been printed yet, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm actually like putting it in my head now for like, well, keep that in mind for a rainy day. But floating did not ultimately end up working out for them. And so Scott Larrabee still loved the idea. And when they moved to Commander decks was like, okay, I want to keep this around somewhere. And that's where the idea of the Vows came from. So the Vows were very much Scott Larrabee's baby that evolved out of that original floating mechanic. If you all like floating, let us know in the comments. Maybe I'll go in and put some floating cards in a future set. Who knows? Lots of fun to be had there. Makes Zedru a lot stronger, that's for sure.
Yes.
But so that is where these things came from, which I think is really cool. Let's look at another cycle. Join Forces. Do you remember this? Okay.
Other players can pay mana to get the effect of the spell.
Yeah. So Join Forces did kind of set the tone for something many future Commander decks would do. I don't think we broke this until Commander 2019, but it was every deck had a card that was part of a cycle, and there were 5 very tightly cycled cards throughout all 5 decks. And yeah, you're absolutely correct, Melissa. Join Forces was a mechanic where each player, you and everybody else, could pay any amount of mana and it would contribute toward a larger effect. So to give you an example, the white one, Alliance of Arms, is a 1 mana sorcery, and it says, Join Forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player puts X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. So if I cast this and I pay 3 mana, and you pay 3 mana, and Mark pays 3 mana, we all get 9 soldier tokens, which is pretty wild. This mechanic is not super played now, but I'm going to have you take your best shot. I told you what the white one just did. What do you think the other 3 do?
Okay. So I'm pretty sure I know what the green one does because I just remember playing it, and that's player search for basic lands.
Yep. Collective Voyage, single green, you all chip in some mana, and you each get X tapped basics from your deck. Yep.
I don't know what the other ones do, but I'll just try and guess based on color pie. Yep. So maybe the blue one is card draw.
100%. You all draw X cards.
Great. All right. So we have the red one. What could the red one do? Damage to players is weird. Damage to target creature is weird because like you have to target the creature as you cast the spell. So it probably is not that. What else could it do? It wouldn't be tokens. We weren't doing treasure back then. I don't know. Any hints?
Well, I think, Melissa, the designers had the same question that you did of like, what do we do? All 4 of the other ones are 1 mana sorceries. Okay. The red one is a 6 mana dragon. There's like, I don't know what we're going to do. It's just a dragon. So they made a 6 mana, 5/5 flying dragon with joined forces. When it attacks or blocks, you can all pay mana into it, and it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the amount of mana paid this way.
Wow. So you can be like, okay, here's my dragon. I'm going to attack you. Do you want to help me kill him? Is
yes,
that like
exactly.
Basically, yeah.
Right. We just all kick in. It's like, I'm going to attack George. Every non-George player, do you want to chip mana in to deal damage to George? And it totally works. And then there's the black one, Shared Trauma. It's a 1 mana sorcery. Any guesses on this one?
Let's see. Black abilities.
I would have gotten this one wrong for sure. I know Magic cards pretty well. This is not one that I remembered.
Well, if I knew nothing about any of the other ones, my first guess would be lose life, draw cards. But the blue one already does that, so it can't be that. There's life draining, which that doesn't make sense here. And again, we already had tokens, so that doesn't make any sense here. Life loss, each player loses life, maybe? I'll guess that.
Yeah, this is a tough one because a lot of Black's effects don't make sense. I think maybe in retrospect you could have done some kind of board sweeper where creatures get -X/-X or something. But no, believe it or not, is each player mills X cards. Not what I would have expected.
Wow, would not have guessed that. Okay, yeah.
I would not guess that for the black spell, and also it's very weak, I would say, in general. But
yes, yep.
But there you go. So those are the Joined Forces cards. This was an idea from Ken. It kind of was inspired a bit by Prosperity. He really liked Prosperity because it's fair in small doses, but pretty busted if you have enough mana to kick into it to mill people out or something like that. And so that's kind of where this idea sprang from. And he liked using the mechanic here because he had the idea of doing a cool mechanic that you would never do in one-on-one Magic, which is a cool way to cement them as ideas, right? Let's try a brand new thing that we've never tried in one-on-one Magic before. So these are the 2 kind of cycles of the set. I'm curious, Melissa, let's just give them some grades here, not to crib off the receivables, but I thought it was a great and fun idea.
Well, you got to tell me the scale.
Yes, the scale is A through F, and you can use pluses or minuses as you choose. What is your grade for the Vow cycle, A through F?
We'll go with B. Like, I think the cycle is very good. It promotes like politics. It has multiple uses, and they all make sense. Like, it makes sense as a cycle, and all the cards make sense individually as cards. Oh, does that mean I should give it an A, actually? I haven't really thought about the grades, to be honest, so it's hard to say, but I think it's a very solid cycle. And we reprint them in Commander products, like, all the time, so clearly there's some success there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a huge win. I think Scott nailed it with these. They've always been great. I'm also going to give them a B, though, for the reason that there's a kind of a hole in them that we had to fix later on with the impetuses and Spectral Grasp, which is that your opponent can still block with them, which I find kind of annoying, right? You put the Vow on it and they just choose, don't attack. And then like it sucks because you get down to one-on-one and you're like, oh, you vowed my thing, but now it's a really good blocker against you. So I'm going to give it I'll give it a B+. I'll give it a little better than a B.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I think it's close to A, but I don't really know what A means yet. Like, maybe like a couple podcasts from now, I'll have figured it out. But as of now, I don't really know what anything means. So I'm kind of.
We get to make it up, Melissa. We get to make it up whatever we want. I thought about doing like a 1 through 10 grading scale, but I was like, well, the professor uses grades, Receivables uses grades. I'll just use A through F. Why not? It was just weird for me because I didn't go to public school. I never was graded on an A through F scale. So I truly have no idea, like, other than like watching the Disney Channel, what these grades mean. But I've got enough of a feel by like limited resources and the professor and Receivables to have some guesses. But we make our own scale here. So officially we have 1 data point on the scale, which is that these are like B's or B pluses.
So A must mean absolutely perfect, or A plus means absolutely perfect. So
A plus is perfect. A is like basically perfect.
Yeah. So these cards are like in between like B plus and A somewhere probably.
Yeah, I guess we can say like B plus from both of us, something like that on these. The plus and minus thing always confuses me in grading. It's like, why have plus and minuses? Why don't you use a 10-point scale? Come on. But anyway, I didn't go to school. I don't know these things. Okay, how about join forces? A through F for these. All
right, so I'm really sorry to the designers, but like these are not going to get a very good grade from me. Like probably an F.
Wow.
Well, the thing is like, so first of all, like, there are some cards that worked. You know, they make sense individually as cards, but a lot of them really don't. And also, this is supposed to be a tight cycle, and this is not a tight cycle, like in the execution, because of the dragon just kind of like throws that all away for me. And then, like, thirdly, some of the cards just don't do anything, and they're just, I don't know, if you cast them, it's downside. Like, I play my black one to mill myself, but my opponent is also a graveyard deck, and they have more mana than me. Like, you just don't ever want to cast that card. And I think, like, making cards that are downsides to cast and upsides for your opponent is just like a pretty big fail. So does that mean it's a true F? I haven't really decided that yet, honestly. But it's close.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's always rough when you want to make a 5-card cycle, make a mechanic for a 5-card cycle, and you get through like the first 2 or 3, and you're like, I think we're out of ideas. Like, I don't know what to do from here. And looking at these cards, it's like, okay, make tokens, got it. Get lands, got it. Draw cards, got it. And then you're like, uh-oh, not a lot more options left. I'll say that I actually think the red one is pretty sweet. Like, I like Mana Charge Dragon a decent amount. It's cool that you know who it's going to hit. So everyone's like, yeah, whatever. I'll kick in some mana toward that. I also like give some points for like in retrospect, like it led the charge of commander focused mechanics, right? It was like, okay, this is a new kind of design space we're playing in here. But I gotta say, like, a lot of them just don't play out that well. Like, give everyone else 1/1 tokens. They get to attack with their tokens first. You know, like that's kind of bad for you. They get to use their mana first. That's kind of bad for you. And they just aren't, having actually tried to make cards with this mechanic, they're actually just like aren't many good designs. So I'm gonna give this one a D personally. Like, I don't think it's a straight up F. But
because the thing is, I don't know what an F is yet. Like, I don't know what an F means. Like, if we had like kind of like a data point of this is an F, then sure. So who knows? Like, maybe it's like a D- or something. I don't know. I will like give you that the dragon is cool, but it's not part of the cycle. Like, this is a cycle, and they wanted to make this cycle like really tight, and they did that with the Vows, and they didn't really do that here. It's just weird. Yeah.
So it's a good attempt, Ken. You know, strong effort on these, but ultimately they didn't really pan out. But they did set the stage for a lot of stuff in the future, which I think is pretty cool. A couple other things to rattle off here. One are the forces, not a full cycle, but I just want to mention them. Of course, Verdant Force, very famous card from Tempest. We then did 2 more forces here, Magmatic Force and Celestial Force. Do you remember what these do, Melissa?
I do not. Should I look these up or should I guess?
Well, so Verdant Force is an 8-mana creature that makes a 1/1 sapling every upkeep. What do you think the red one does?
So the question is, do they all make tokens like Verdant Force, or do they all do things of their color, right? So
I'll let you know that they do not all make tokens.
Okay.
That one for free.
All right. So the red one, probably on upkeep, it does damage to the active player.
Yeah. So
2
Magmatic
damage,
Force,
1 damage.
You have designed a lot more reasonable card than maybe they made. Magmatic Force is an 8-mana 7/7 that every upkeep deals 3 damage to any target. Just anybody, straight
target.
up.
Oh, okay,
so your upkeep, I'll fry Mark's creature, or it can hit creatures, so it's pretty brutal.
Yep, that's super weird to me because, like, I don't know, if it's your upkeep, I feel like I should do something to that player, and if it's this person's upkeep, I should do something to this player, right? It's weird that it's like, okay, it's your upkeep, but I'm going to target player D. Okay, now it's your upkeep, still player D. Okay, now it's my upkeep, still player D. Like, that's
right. In a 4-player turn cycle, you can deal 12 damage to 1 player, right? So it's pretty mean. Actually, funnily enough, I reprinted this card in Battle Bond, so I thought it played pretty well in Two-Headed Giant, where you got 1 trigger for every 2 players as opposed to 1 trigger per player. But it's can be pretty brutal in Commander. It's 8 mana, so it doesn't seem like a lot of play or anything.
At 8 mana, like, this card does not concern me. Obviously, like, you know, this card's been around for a while. I didn't even know what it does, so, like, it's not like a particularly strong card. Just like, as a design, it's a little weird that it's any target when it's like caring about, like, you know, different players' upkeeps.
And here, what about the white one, Celestial Force?
So my gut says gain life, but that sounds super weak. So I'm hoping that it does something a little bit cooler than gain life, but maybe it's just gain life.
You got bad news, Melissa. You're getting 3 life every upkeep of this thing. So the red one, shoot something with the lightning bolt every turn. White one, just gain 12 life every turn cycle, I guess. That's what you get to do. So these were modeled after Verdant Force, and then we did the next 2 actually in Commander 2013, which we'll get to when we get to that, if we get to that. if you're enjoying this, let us know in the comments. See if we do more. Okay, one more section I want to get to is one that probably mattered a lot to you, which is legacy playables. So one thing that happened with this set is first time really doing this print into legacy thing. It gave them an interesting opportunity to actually try it out. Additionally, as you said, no one knew if these were going to be successful or not. So almost to ensure that, you know, these would get purchased, we snuck a couple cards that would be targeted towards legacy in here.
Yes.
To get played. And I'm sure you know which two cards these are.
Yeah. So definitely, like when I first saw these decks, it was very obvious to me that they were putting a legacy card in one of the decks. The first one is Flusterstorm, which I mentioned earlier in the episode. This card is just something that Legacy needed. So it was like kind of obvious that they're like targeting this format, even though it was in the Commander product. So Flusterstorm is a 1 mana. It costs you for an instant with Storm, and it has counter target spell, instant or sorcery spell, unless they pay 1. Right. So the idea is if you're playing against a Storm deck, you can counter all the Storm copies. And it's just also like neat as like a little force spike, or if you're in some kind of counter war, it can counter a bunch of things or one thing. So pretty cool card and a very welcome addition to Legacy for me. And then the other card is, I believe, Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah, I remember being really excited about this card too for Legacy sideboards. I was like, wow, that's sweet. Like, I don't remember what I was playing at the time. I don't know. Maybe some like Tarmogoyf deck or something. But like, this card felt pretty Tarmogoyf-y in that it was a 2 mana potentially very big creature and also hated on graveyards for like a pretty cheap cost. And Legacy has changed a lot in 10 years. I don't think this card is particularly Legacy playable anymore, but at the time it was like pretty groundbreaking, I think, in that it was like, you know, a direct to print into Legacy product, and it looked like they really tried, and it looked pretty successful. Like, it was played in sideboard. I think it accomplished their goals.
Yeah, I mean, these cards are both super memorable to me. Scavenging Ooze, I think, was just such a slam dunk design. It's even come back in standard, right? People love this little Skoos. Really fun card to play with. So I actually talked with Eric Lauer, and it turns out Eric designed Scavenging Ooze. He was working on the deck, and he had the idea of making some legacy playables in here. It was one of his ideas to do so. Ken said he needed a green card to fill a slot, and Eric came back with Scavenging Ooze, went right in, and the mad genius Eric Lauer, of course, nailed it right away, basically, with this card design. So.
Yeah, definitely not surprised to hear that Eric designed that. Like, if you say, hey, Eric, design me this particular card for this goal, like, he usually nails it, and especially since, like, this one was for a competitive format, which is something that he really shines in. Yeah, definitely not surprised.
Now, these two cards to me are quite different in that, like, I look at Scavenging Ooze and I'm like, oh, that's a cool commander card. Can see play on Eternal formats. That's great. That one, thumbs up for me. Flusterstorm is kind of egregious to me because it is not a commander card in like any sense of the word, right? It's like,
yeah, it is definitely not like
unless you pay 1. Like,
yeah, I remember like actually the player who bought it was in the Zedru deck, right?
I think so.
Check whatever deck it was in, they removed this card right away. They're like, I need to replace this card. This card is terrible. It doesn't do anything. And I'm like, yep, this card is obviously for Legacy. Like, they wanted Legacy players to buy this clearly.
Yeah, Flusterstorm was indeed in the Zedru deck, and yeah, it was very much for Legacy. So I mean, I'm glad the card exists. It probably does some good things in like, you know, CEDH or something like that. But in terms of like showing up in a Commander Precon, it's a very strange card with a very, very different purpose. So that's kind of interesting. And we see this a little bit for the next few years. We'll get into that when we get into that. But it's not a thing we really do anymore right now. If we kind of focus on just making the cards in Commander decks for Commander, because it turns out Commander is huge. We don't need to make sure that it sells and succeeds to other player groups as much. And there's Modern Horizons or whatever for the people who want stuff that goes into those Eternal formats these days. Although, you know, Flusterstorm has done a lot of good things for Magic, so I guess it's still good that it exists. I appreciate both these cards are answers. They're not threats, right? So they're mostly nice. I mean, Skoos is a threat, but like it helps deal with stuff, right?
Yeah, technically it's a threat, but like it's mostly like you weren't putting this in your main deck with the idea of like killing people with it. You were putting it in your sideboard against Dredge.
As opposed to like, I don't know, True Name Nemesis, who when we get there, I've got some stories to tell about that card.
Yep. I also have some stories, so we better like hopefully people like this so we can keep doing this.
For sure. A couple other cards I just want to rattle off the names of really fast that I think were iconic cards that showed up here for the first time or did something unusual. Archangel of Strife. This is a big angel where when it comes into play, each player chooses war or peace. I remember seeing this and being like, oh, that's really unusual. Like you're having players choose between two words. And later on, we would kind of use this technology for the Khans of Tarkir or the Fate Reforged Sieges.
The Sieges.
That's what they were called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We sold that technology for this. Martyr's Bond is a card that came here. This was a card designed by Scott Larrabee. In fact, I think he actually owns the original art to it. It's like a white grave pact, and there's kind of a funny story here. So Scott Larrabee was on the design team, as I mentioned many times, and he was having trouble getting some of his designs through. So one night, he just had a night. He was at home. It was late, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to make some crazy cards and see what everyone thinks. I'm just going to really notch up the power, and being told my designs aren't exciting enough, I'm just going to go for it. So almost as if he was in some kind of like trance, he sat down at his computer and like just typed up a bunch of cards, and a ton of those cards made it into this set. And actually later on down the road, he would go back to this file for years and get cards from the ones he made that day into sets. In the future Commander products, there's a few that made it in. And Scott's original design for Martyr's Bond was actually 5 mana. 1 black, white, but otherwise stayed pretty much the same. Scott also sent me a picture of the original art for the card, which he has hanging on his wall for it. It's a card he's very proud of for sure. So a few cards that made it out of that like wild night are Martyr's Bond, Hornet Queen, which by the way had a great playtest name. It was called Buzz the Beekeeper was the name of Hornet Queen, which is pretty funny. Now, when Scott made the original Buzz, it was a little more ridiculous. It was 2 green for a 2/2 that came into play with 4 bees that could each sacrifice to deal a damage. Yeah, pretty strong. He made Trench Gorger, Scythe Spectre, and he also made Mimeoplasm. Now, I talked with Scott Larrabee, and he actually had his original Mimeoplasm design. It was called Blorg, the Amalgamator, and as we mentioned, originally black, green, white. It read just like Mimeoplasm, except it had the combined power and toughness of both creatures, but cost 7 mana. Fun little fact for you. From that original batch of cards. So great work, Scott, on his wild night of just like hitting that like perfect trance of making Magic cards.
I did have to look most of these up.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. Soul Snare card, which showed up and then was eventually reprinted in Modern Horizons as a really cool card. Chaos Warp shows up here for the first time, a card which is a staple in Commander now. One of the very few ways for red to kill off enchantments as well, which Rosewater didn't really see this one, unfortunately, so we kind of made it without his sign off. So Color Pie Break for sure. Whoops.
Yeah, maybe he just like wasn't really paying attention to that. It's like, oh, it's just the multiplayer product. I don't have to pay attention to that. I'm going to pay attention to these standard sets. So I can kind of see how that slipped by. It might have even been before the Council of Colors, right?
Yeah, it was. And in fact, part of the reason why Council of Colors was created is so that Mark didn't have to do it all himself. Because it used to be Mark Rosewater would pay attention to every set, look at the colors for every set to make sure Color Pie was being upheld. Eventually, that was like just too much work for Mark because he was also doing all the other stuff he does at the same time. Yep. So we formed the Council of Colors, which with one person assigned to each color, looking at every upcoming set. So Chaos Warp is part of actually the impetus for this occurring, as well as a card I'll get to that we'll talk about maybe in a future episode. Stranglehold is a card that Ken Nagel made, which is very memorable to me because it's just like very much a red hate card. Players can't search libraries and they can't take extra turns. That's just what the card does. Yeah, like
noble goal here of making players skip extra turns. But unfortunately, this card is just like kind of too weak to see play, right?
Right.
Like, I wish this card just, I don't know, maybe if it was like a creature with a strong rate and had another ability, you know? But like, I think this kind of effect is like very needed in Commander because extra turns are, in my opinion, like one of the most egregious things you can do in Commander, especially chaining them together, right? So I think we should actually do more stuff like this.
Yeah, I love Stranglehold. I think what we've learned over time is you have to kind of do something else with your answer card. Otherwise, it just doesn't make main decks. But still, a cool card some folks play with. A card that I love is Acorn Catapult, if you know this one. This was almost surely designed by Mark Purvis, who is a huge Squirrel fan.
Yes,
it is an artifact. it taps to deal a damage to somebody, and then whoever you dealt the damage to, whether a creature or a player, they get a squirrel token.
This card is adorable.
It's awesome. It's also it's great art. It like shows you throwing, acorns at people, so squirrels show up. And at the time, squirrels were not part of really Magic. I mean, they were used in older sets, like we saw them in Odyssey, things like that. But the word from creative was no more squirrels. Squirrels are too cutesy. We don't want them in Magic. And for a long time, we didn't do squirrels. And my hunch, I didn't hear from Purvis, but my hunch is that he made this to be like, well, it's a goofy commander set. We can do squirrels, right? And then this card got made as a little squirrel rebellion, which of course now, they were just the face of Modern Horizons 2, so we do squirrels plenty, but a different story there with Acorn Catapult. And then a Homeward Path as the last card I'll just mention that was in this set. That's a land that gives you back all the stuff that people have stolen to their appropriate owners. Very good against the Zedru deck and very important now.
Yep. I'm really glad that card exists. Like, I remember in my commander groups, like there were just tons of like control magic effects going on. And like this card kind of kept that in check. And like, it's a very low opportunity cost to play in a deck. Unlike the card we just looked at, Stranglehold, which you have to actually have mana and cast this card and take a turn off from doing relevant things for your hate card. But with Homeward Path, it's like, no, you can just play it as a land and tap it for spells. And then when you need it, it's a land. So like, definitely like cards like that when they're that narrow to be on lands.
Yeah. And once again, it has a very noble goal of like cutting off control magics and all that kind of stuff. There's also two cards I want to call out that I'll call frowns. They're just like, this doesn't work anymore. The first is Poor Spell Crumple. Do you remember this card?
Yeah, I remember it's a 3-mana counter spell. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think it used to work with the old commander rule, but probably no longer works. But let me just look it up to make sure.
So yeah, Spell Crumple is 1 blue for an instant. You counter target spell, and then you put the spell on the bottom of their library, and Spell Crumple also goes on the bottom of your library. So if you don't know, it used to be that you could do what's called tucking commanders, where if you put a commander into someone's library, it stayed there. It didn't go back into your command zone. And so that was kind of the answer to people's commanders was, oh, your commander's too strong. We did this. In 2015, the rules committee changed the rule because it was pretty frustrating, right? You build your deck around your commander. You should be able to have your commander. And also led to weird situations where like your commander was in a different sleeve and you shuffled it into your library, but like, you could kind of figure out where it was.
I used to keep my commander in the outer sleeves. So when it did get shuffled, you could just take it out of the outer sleeve, like the big sleeves.
Oh, yeah, like top loaders or something, right?
Well, they're sleeves. I think they're just called outer sleeves. They're like,
cool.
Have you ever seen somebody like quad sleeve a deck?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, those are the sleeves that go over the normal sleeves.
Got it.
That
makes sense.
Maybe triple sleeve. You have the perfect fits. You have your normal sleeves, and then you have the outer sleeves. So for the people who do the triple sleeving.
I remember one time I went to Japan for a Grand Prix, and round one, shuffling up, whatever. I present my deck. My deck is like, normal deck size. And their deck was like quad sleeve and just like this huge or something. And I was like, wow, I'm not sleeving my decks that much. That is wild.
I went to Japan for a Grand Prix as WotC staff as part of like the Magic 25th anniversary that we did a few years ago. And I did spell slinging. And let me tell you, the Japanese players, this is very common for them. Like everybody triple sleeved their deck, and their deck was like this big, and it was like very unwieldy to shuffle, but it was very common. It was like just a normal part of like their gameplay. They just triple sleeve their decks. That's just their life.
Right. It helps keep your card protected, but also I think it's made it over to the States too, because I see cubes that are like this all the time, right? Where people have their powered cubes. They don't want to take any risks, and they'll triple sleeve their cube, just make sure that it stays well. So, creates good business for folks like Ultra Pro who help make sleeves, right? So that's great.
That was quite the tangent there.
It's quite the tangent, but we're allowed to do that a little bit. The other card I want to mention is Trade Secrets, which is sad for a different reason. This is a card that has since been banned. It was legal at the time in Commander, so we didn't do anything that was like not okay, but we printed a card that is now banned, so we actually can't reprint this deck. In fact, we talked about putting this deck into a Commander anthology, and then we're like, oh crap, we can't do it because it has a now banned card in there. And if you don't know what Trade Secrets is 1 blue, target opponent draws 2 cards, then you draw 4 cards. that opponent may repeat this process as many times as they choose. It's optional. You can choose to drop to 4 cards. So the problem is in a multiplayer game is you just collude with somebody. You're just like, hey, how about you draw 50 cards and I draw 50 cards? Sound good? And, it's kind of a frustrating situation.
Yep. And it's only 3 mana. Like that is, kind of messed up.
It's pretty silly in Commander. So it's since been banned. Okay, I've got just a little bit left here. I know we're almost at 2 hours, but I've got just a little bit left here, a few more things to cover. It's been a great chat, though. I've had an awesome time, Melissa. This is super fun.
Yeah, it has been fun, but wow, I can't believe it's been almost 2 hours. Wild, but go ahead.
Yes, I have just a couple more things to go through here, and hopefully you all enjoy this next bit. So I want to briefly talk reprints. So I mostly talked new cards, but if you've only been playing recently, imagine a time before master sets. Okay, like reprints happen very rarely. We did like dual decks and plane chase and arch enemy, but like we didn't really reprint cards. Players weren't asking for reprints, and we just didn't really do it very often. To give you a great example, Propaganda is in these Commander decks, in the first series of Commander decks. The time it had been printed previously was 1997 in Tempest, right? And that's a card that you would really like as a popular Commander card. It's even a popular casual card before Commander existed, but just we didn't reprint it and players didn't ask for it because we didn't reprint a lot of cards. But here in these Commander decks, we started reprinting a bunch of cards. So there were a lot of big reprints. I'll name a few: Insurrection, Path to Exile, Eternal Witness, Solemn Simulacrum, and Mother of Runes were all reprinted here. And they hadn't been reprinted for a long time. We also reprinted Invigorate, which I want to bring up because that's kind of interesting. Invigorate, if you don't know, is 2 and a green to give a creature +4/+4. And if your opponent, if you control a forest, you can give your opponent like 3 life instead of paying its mana cost. Mm-hmm. You would not think of Invigorate as like a Commander card or like a combat trick. Like that's not really a card that sees play in Commander. And so the thing I want to kind of think about these reprints is this was a different time. It was before EDH Rec, before Command Zone, before it was played around the world nearly as much as it is now. And it was kind of the Wild West. Like a lot of Commander decks were just like cards I owned that I liked and put in a deck together. So
yes.
the format was just smaller, right? It was just 10 years fewer of Magic cards that were made. I mean, do you remember some of the decks that you played with around this time, Melissa?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but my first Commander deck that I built was Shroom. And it was mostly just an infinite combo deck. I had like several infinite combos. And you said Vendilion Click as yours, but somebody in my play group also had Vendilion Click. And it was literally just Vendilion Click and only counters. And that was the deck. And I remember to metagame against that person, there's like a card that you like mill them until they get a creature. Right?
Oh yeah, Telman Performance.
Yeah, that one, right. Yeah. So like they would play that against the Vendilion Click player and they would just die because they don't have any creatures in their deck, But yeah, there were just a lot less options for commanders before these commander decks came out. So everybody kind of just played the same kind of stuff.
So a lot of the reprints were pretty wild, like I said, kind of all over the place. And there's some reprints I look at, and it is hard for me to believe that it was in a Commander deck, because just by today's standards, if you told people this was in your Commander deck, they'd be like, what? What's that doing in your Commander deck? So Melissa, I want to play a quick game I call Fact or Fiction. Okay, here's how this game works. I'm going to tell you 2 cards, and one of them is in one of these Commander decks, and one of them is not in these Commander decks. So for each one, I want you to guess which one is actually in a Commander deck, okay?
Okay.
If you can guess which one, all the better, but I'm just asking to see if you can guess which ones were in these Commander decks. And this won't work for the later segments, for the later Commander decks we do, but for this first series, it like blew my mind which cards were in some of these. Okay, so I'm gonna kick it off with the first one. Which one of these was in a Commander deck? Is it Jackal Pup, R2/1? Whenever this takes damage, you take that much damage. Or Goblin Cadets, which is R2/1. Whenever it's blocked or becomes blocked, you give it to another player. Okay.
I would say that Goblin Cadets is in a Commander deck.
You're right. Goblin Cadets is in the Zedru deck because you can give it to your opponent very easily.
Yeah, because you can just give it to somebody else. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. That one, a little more sensible. R2/1, still not the hottest thing in Commander, but it at least helps out a little bit. Make sure it gets around the table. All right. Let's kick things up a notch. Let's go to the next one. Mine Bearer, which is 2/1/1. Tap, sacrifice Mine Bearer, destroy target attacking creature. Or Jotun Grunt, which is 1 dub for a 4/4. and it has cumulative upkeep. Put 2 cards from your graveyard on the bottom of your library.
Interesting. I remember Jotun Grunt from Extended, actually.
Yeah.
All right. So I am going to say that Jotun Grunt is in the commander deck because it seems to have like synergy. It's sort of anti-synergy with like the graveyard stuff, but you tend to fill up your graveyard a lot, so you can keep your 2-mana 4/4 in play, right? Maybe hate on your opponent's graveyard stuff too, because it did target your opponent's graveyard as well, right?
Let's see. Jotun Grunt. Yes, did 2 cards from a single graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library.
Yep. This card was a pretty popular card in Extended, and just, zoo decks played them.
Yes, you are correct. It showed up in the Political Puppets deck. Once again, as a card maybe you would give away or more likely hate on your opponent's graveyard shenanigans with. All right, let's move on to the next one. So you're 2 for 2. You're doing great, Melissa. We got 10 of them here. You're 2 for 2 so far. Let's go on to the next one. Slipstream Eel, which is a 7-mana 6/6 that can't attack if you unless your opponent controls an island, with cycling 1U. Or Joda's Avenger, which is a 5U 4/4 from Time Spiral. You can give it -1/-1 until end of turn to give it your choice of Shadow, Protection from Red. I gotta pull this up. It's a Shadow, Protection from Red, or Vigilance, or Double Strike. So, and you can do that as many times as you want.
Weird. Okay.
One of these 2 cards is in a deck. What do you think it is?
Well, so first of all, I have an answer. I would be surprised if that Joda thing was in a deck, because that card's like a pretty complex card and just kind of weird. But the eel is so first of all, if it's in play, like, you're gonna have somebody to attack. They have islands, and the cycling just kind of makes it useful if you draw it early and don't have mana. So I would say the eel is in commander decks.
3 for 3. She is on fire.
Oh, nice.
I think the idea here was you could cycle it away and then you mimeoplasm it. So you would get 6 +1/+1 counters on your thing, which is actually that's not wild. It's not the wildest thing I've ever heard of.
That other card you said is just so weird.
Pretty strange. Here's our next card. Is it Razorjaw Oni, which is a 3B 4/5 that says black creatures can't block? Or is it Treacherous Urge, which is 4B, look at target opponent's hand, put a creature card from their hand on the battlefield under your control. It gains haste, sacrifice it at end of turn.
Interesting. So first, a follow-up question. What is the creature type of that first creature you said?
The creature type of Razorjaw Oni, it's a demon, I'm pretty sure.
A demon. I kind of see where you're getting at here.
It's a demon spirit.
Yeah. All right. So my guess is it's the demon because, well, Kaalia does care about demons. So like if it had creature type demon, that kind of gives me the idea that it's in the deck. And also so black creatures can't block.
Black creatures can't block.
Yeah. That just kind of seems like an interesting multiplayer card to me, because you likely have opponents who have black creatures in their deck, and you can kind of just, attack them freely if you have this in play. So.
All right, 4 for 4. Good work. You nailed it. I wonder, everyone out there, post your results down below. Got a few more to go through. Okay, next one is green. Is it Ivy Elemental, which is XG for a 0/0 that gets X +1/+1 counters, or Squallmonger, which is 3G for a 3/3 creature. You know this one. It's Mercadian Masks block, but 3G for a 3/3 creature with 2 mana, deals 1 damage to each creature with flying, and any player can activate this ability.
All right. This one is a lot tougher because I can see arguments for both being indexed, because the Ivy Elemental has +1/+1 counters, and some of the decks care about counters, and the Squallmonger is like a political card. But my answer is going to be the Squallmonger, because my guess is like they wanted to just try new things with the politics, because they never really built decks with that in mind before, and they just wanted to try something new. So my guess is the Squallmonger.
All right. 5 for 5. Wow.
Nice.
Killing it. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. Murmurs from Beyond. Do you know this card? Murmurs from Beyond.
It sounds so familiar.
It's 2U for an arcane spell. It's instant. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your graveyard and the rest into your hand.
Yeah, I remember this card. This card is in limited. It was you draw 2 lands and you lose your best card.
Yes, every time. Or Whiplash Trap, which is from Lorwyn. It's not from Lorwyn. It's from Zendikar. It's 3 UU to return target creature. Or I should just look it up. It's return 2 target creatures to its owner's hand, and it's got the trap condition.
Oh, that card, yeah.
If your opponent had 2 creatures enter the battlefield under their control this turn, you can pay U rather than pay its cost. So bounce 2 creatures. If your opponent played 2 creatures this turn, you can pay 1 mana instead of 5 mana for it. It's also an instant dash trap. Which one is it?
Okay, so my guess is the Murmurs from Beyond, because again, going with the whole politics theme, this is the more political card. You can kind of collude with your opponent and be like, hey, will you give me the sweet cards? Or, and then I will hook you up later by not attacking you or something, So that's my guess.
Nailed it. You're right on with these political cards. Well done. 6 for 6. Can she go all the way? Let's find out. Next one. Which of these 2 cards? Is it Pollen Lullaby? Pollen Lullaby is 1 and a white for an instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Clash with an opponent. If you win the clash, creatures that player controls don't untap during the player's next untap step. Or is it, and I always say this word wrong, is it Conclave Phalanx? I can never say this word right. Phalanx? Is that it?
It has Convoke?
Yeah, it's 4 dub for a 2/4 human soldier with Convoke. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature you control.
Oh, only you control, not on the battlefield. Ah. Yep. If you said on the battlefield, I would have went with that. And the first one was the Fog with Clash?
Yeah. Fog with Clash.
Okay. Okay, so again, going with it's probably the political card. I will guess the Pollen Lullaby because you can clash with the person who has the biggest stuff in their deck and maybe win. Or maybe not win. Wait, hold on. No, you're trying to win. Oh, maybe you have the big stuff in your deck. All right. I see. All right, Pollen Lullaby.
Nailed it. Pollen Lullaby is down. Good one. All right, we only got 3 more to go. You're currently undefeated. Right. 7 for 7. Here's the next one. We've got Insight War. This is 2 and a red for an instant. Choose 1. Creatures target player controls attack this turn if able. Or creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. Entwine 2, so you can do them both if you pay the Entwine cost. Or is it Oni of Wild Places? It's a 5R 6/5 demon spirit with haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you have to return a red creature to its owner's hand.
Oh, wow. That demon seems great for the Kaalia deck because you can just return it and replay it with the Kaalia. That's sweet. I mean, I could also see arguments for the other one because making opponents attack is also something that's appealing for multiplayer. But I'm going to guess the demon.
All right, you got it again. The demon was a giveaway twice in a row. You saw through my ruse. Only 2 more to go. Which is it? Is it Whirlpool Whelm? Do you know this one? This is one.
Is it an Apocalypse card?
No, it's Whirlpool Warrior. Easy point of confusion. This is 1 U instant. Clash with an opponent, then return target creature to its owner's hand. If you win, you may put that creature on top of its owner's library instead. So 2 mana unsummon, and if you win the clash, you put on top of their library. And if you don't know, by the way, Clash is each clashing player reveals the top card of their library, and then you win if it has a higher converted mana cost. The other card is Shifting Borders. This is 3U for an arcane instant, and it has exchange control of 2 target lands. And it also, just in case, splices onto arcane for 3 and a blue.
Huh. Okay, well, so I don't know. I feel like you're kind of giving me a lot of context clues here because there was an arcane card previously, and exchanging control of 2 target lands can kind of mess people up. Like you can get, I don't know, a Gaia's Cradle or something maybe. I'm gonna guess the exchange control of lands thing.
Control 2 lands. Oh no, Whirlpool Whelm is in fact the correct answer.
Oh no. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Still very good record. Very good record.
Pretty hard question. Like, you could have argued that like maybe Clash is a theme in these decks and there's a bunch of Clash going around.
I mean, it's Shifting Borders and Zedri makes some sense, right? You give them a land and then you draw an extra card and get an extra life every turn. And
also the Whirlpool Whelm is super weak too. So like, I don't know. I don't really want to cast that in Commander, but all right, let's move on.
And then finally, the last one. See if you can end up with a 9/1 record. Is it Extra Arms, which is a 4R enchantment aura? It's enchant creature, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, it deals 2 damage you deal 2 damage to 2 target creature or player. Or is it Fault Grinder, which is a 7 mana 4/4 elemental? When it enters the battlefield, you destroy target land, and it evokes for 4 and a red.
Both of those cards strike me as too weak to play in Commander, so this is kind of tough. So we have the Elemental with Evoke. And sorry, what was the other one again?
And Fault Grinder also tramples. I just looked it up to be sure.
Okay.
The other one is Extra Arms.
Oh, Extra Arms. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a aura that when the enchanted creature attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target.
All right. The Extra Arms is probably the card is probably in the Zedru deck because you can give that away and still, get the bonus on your creature. So Extra Arms.
Extra Arms. Unfortunately, it is Fault Grinder. Believe it or not, gives you 5 mana Stone Rain is in a commander deck. Actually,
what does everybody think about this? This is wild.
Actually, it blew my mind. I looked through these decks. There was Fault Grinder as a land destruction spell, Wrecking Ball as a land destruction spell, Numot the Devastator, of course, who destroys 2 lands when he hits your opponent. And
yes, I remember that.
Just to really settle the deal, Ruination, which is 4 mana destroy all non-basic lands.
Yep.
So these days, don't really do a lot of LD in Commander decks.
Commander
not that much fun.
was a much different thing back then. Wow, I'm so surprised. Land destruction is just so unfun. I'm surprised that there were multiple land destruction spells here. I don't know.
Yeah, well, still 8-2. That's pretty good. Everyone out there who played along, post your score down below. And curious how many of you got the full 10-0 record. Congrats.
Great job with the questions.
Oh, yeah, it was a lot of fun looking up weird old cards for this. Oh, and you keyed in the right things. There's also a lot of other cards that I did not get put on this list that are very, very... there's another Clash card, Lash Out, which is 3 damage with Clash.
I'm familiar with Lash Out because that saw play and constructed a bit. The 3 damage to a creature with Clash.
Yeah, 3 yep.
3 damage with essentially Scry 1. And was the upside they take 3 or something?
They take 3 as well.
Yeah, that card is potentially very powerful. If, there's randomness. You have to win the Clash. And if you're playing red aggro, you might not do that. But if you hit your Jackal Pup and they hit their land, hey, they're taking 3.
Yeah, in Commander is quite good. Yeah, there's a bunch of cards that are just a little, like Foot Bottom Feast and Colossal Might and Boros Guildmage and cards which are a little on the weaker side, but still, I think it was a different time back then once again. And there's still a lot of hits in these decks. So speaking of hits in the decks, let's get to the final segment of our show.
All right.
These are the awards I want to give out. The Receivables does this. I love it. It kind of is one look back at everything going on in the set. And I've got 7 awards to give out. So you and I are going to talk and try and give out awards for these categories. And I picked a few cards in each that I think are the best in the show. Although if you disagree, you're welcome to name one of your own. First category. Here we go. Best for our awards. Best flavor. Best flavor. Which card in this Commander decks has the best flavor? And I'm only looking at the new cards here. The candidates I put down were Archangel of Strife, which is the choose war or peace card. Death by Dragons, where everybody but one player gets a 5/5 dragon. Stranglehold, where you can't take extra turns or shuffle your library. Acorn Catapult, where you fling adorable acorns and squirrels at people. Or Siphon Flesh, where each other player sacrifices a creature and you make zombies for every creature sacrificed this way. Who do you got for best flavor, Melissa?
All right, so it's between Acorn Catapult. Wow, you just listed a bunch of cards and I forgot most of them. I'll be honest.
I'll rename them one more time. We got the Archangel of Strife. We got Death by Dragons. We got Stranglehold. We got Acorn Catapult and Siphon Flesh.
Okay. So it's between the Acorn Catapult and Death by Dragons. Both of those have really cool flavor. I don't want to bias myself with the adorableness of the acorns and the squirrels, though. So I'm going to go with Death by Dragons.
A fine choice, my runner-up, but I will be biased by the Acorn Catapult squirrels.
Okay.
I think they're both great picks, though. Both great picks. So you give it to the Death by Dragons. I give it to the Acorn Catapult. Both awesome choices. Totally down for it. I think it did a good job of showing off how Commander could be a little bit goofy, right? Just hey, it's pretty fun. It's a little bit different than normal. We got squirrels. We got a bunch of dragons showing up to eat one player. That's cool stuff. Okay, the next category is what I call the Oops Award, which is, maybe in retrospect we shouldn't have made this card. That was wrong. I got 5 in this category. I've got Edric, Spy Master of Trest, who we talked about earlier. Could be pretty frustrating in time warpy decks. We've got Chaos Warp, which is a blatant color pie break. Red should not be able to destroy enchantments. We've got Flusterstorm, which is a noble card, but what is it in this product for? We've got Spell Crumple, which at the time worked, but now doesn't work anymore. And then finally Hornet Queen, which good old Buzz the Beekeeper, a bunch of green flyers kind of out of color pie too. Which one of these takes the cake for you as the Oops Award?
Okay, wow, tough because I like the existence of all of these, honestly. Okay, can we just go through them one more time. Sorry,
Yeah.
5 cards is hard to remember.
Yeah, we've got Edric,
Yep.
Chaos Warp, Flusterstorm, Spell Crumple, and Hornet Queen.
Wow. I can argue all of these cards as being positive for Magic, but I do have to pick one. So I'll pick the Chaos Warp for its blatant color pie breaking.
Yeah, that's my pick as well. I think that these first Commander decks did a great job of making cards in general. Nothing in here stands out as like, man, Magic is worse because we made that. To me, it's just Chaos Warp and that it shouldn't be able to kill enchantments. If I could go back and change it, I absolutely would. I know that's been a thorn in design side for a while, so that'd be my pick. But nothing here is like egregious, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. Okay, next category, sweetest legend. Which legend is just the sweetest? And here are my 5 picks. Although if you have a different one, you can let me know. I've got Edric, Zedru, Kaalia, Riku, and Carador as our 5 sweet legends. Who you got?
Well, yeah, this is tough.
This one's really hard.
Yeah, I think it's Riku. It just does a lot of really cool things.
Riku
But it could also be
sweet.
Zedru. Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
All right. I understand that people like really love Zedru. He's just like super novel and interesting, but I like Riku better. He fits my playstyle better.
I think it's really hard for me. For me, it's between Riku, Carador, and Zedru. Those are like my top 3. I'm also going to give it to Riku just because every time I play it, I have a blast. I just love copying spells. I love copying ETB abilities. It's so much fun. But I could not fault anybody for picking Zedru. So it's pretty sweet. Let us know in the comments below which your favorite is. Or if you're listening to the podcast version, I guess, tweet at us. Let us know. You can find us on Twitter. Okay, yep. Next one. This is a funny category I made up. Most weird. Which card is just the weirdest? Commander is known for having very weird, quirky cards. Here are our options. We've got Skullbriar, who, as we already talked about, keeps counters as it moves around. We've got Trench Gorger, which we didn't really talk about, but it's a creature that when it comes into play, you search through your deck and exile any number of land cards, and it gets +1/+1 for every land card you've exiled this way. Or rather, I think it's power and toughness equal to the number of land cards you've exiled this way. Checking. I think it's like base 6/6. Yeah, here it is. So it's base 6/6, or you can just trade out a bunch of lands from your deck to make it really big. There's Ruhan of the Fomori, which is the attack a random player every turn card we talked about earlier. And then also Archangel of Strife, which has you choose war or peace, which is not a thing that you're doing at that point. What wins the most weird for you?
All right. I will rule out the Trench Gorger because that's a riff on Mana Severance, which was a popular tournament card. Okay, so you're going to have to say them all again.
Yeah, Skullbriar, Archangel of Strife, Trench Gorger, and Ruhan of the Fomori.
The last card you said was definitely weird back then, but it makes a ton of sense these days. Looking at the others. No, I don't think Archangel of Strife is weird. And the first one was Skullbriar.
Skullbriar, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's got to be Skullbriar. It just does the most unique thing out of all of them and just does something that Magic has never done before.
Yeah, to me, this is Skullbriar's category to take. Like, it keeps counters as it moves around through zones. Like, that's weird. And no card has ever done this since, right? So that's pretty strange.
Yeah. I mean, like, you can argue that the arena cards, like the perpetual cards from Arena, have those abilities now. But, that's a much different game. Like, this is Magic as a video game, a digital game, as opposed to Magic as a card game. But back then, it was bizarre.
So yeah, I think we'll both align on Skullbriar there. Now here's a category that maybe the play designer in you can come out in. Strongest card. Okay. Just the strongest card. Here's what I got down. Got 6 entrants. I've got Command Tower, which is a card we haven't talked about really at all, but it's pretty strong. We've got Scavenging Ooze and Flusterstorm, both here.
Yep.
We've got Chaos Warp. We've got Kaalia of the Vast as just cheats out stuff for free, which is a pretty big deal. We've got Edric, Spymaster of Trest, draws you a bunch of cards, and also Hornet Queen, which when it was reprinted in Standard saw quite a bit of play, and creates a bunch of Death Touchers. What do you got here for your strongest card? And just
let's start ruling things out. Let's rule out Hornet Queen.
Yep.
Let's rule out Flusterstorm because that's a narrow card. All right, so we have Command Tower, super strong. We have Scavenging Ooze, situationally strong. Kaalia. Did I miss any?
And Chaos Warp and Edric.
Oh, Chaos Warp. Oh, Edric.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Edric is in the running for sure. So Kaalia I'll rule out because, like, yeah, you can put stuff in for free, but the deck building cost is extremely high, and the power and toughness is low enough where it's easy to remove. You have to untap with it to get any payoffs. Let's rule that out. All right, so we have Edric definitely in the running. Let's forget about Scavenging Ooze. That's, like, I think Scavenging Ooze is not on the same level as Edric and Command Tower, so those are in the running right now. Wow. Like, when you first started naming cards and you said Command Tower, I said nothing is going to beat Command Tower. But Edric is extremely powerful. Like, the ceiling is just so high on this card. You get value right away. You don't really have to build around it. All you need are creatures, and that's pretty easy to do in green-blue. But on the other hand, Command Tower, that's just the strongest mana fixer ever in Commander. But you can't play it in other formats, though, can you? Right?
I wouldn't recommend it anyway. It's pretty weak in Legacy.
Yeah. And it's also standard legal because of Brawl, right? I would not recommend it there. Although I have seen people try to play it with, like, a exchanging control of lands situation. Have you seen this?
No, that's amazing.
All right. I have watched a streamer play a deck with Command Towers in Standard, and they were trying to give it away with there's a Call Time Saga that gives away, it exchanges control of lands. Okay.
That's amazing. What will they think of next?
All right, let's kind of reel things back in and talk about what we were actually talking about. All right, I'm going to go with Edric here.
Edric, just the
Final
raw
answer.
rate, drawing cards.
Yeah, super strong rate, value right away, like incredibly high upside.
Yes, he's even saw a bit of play in Legacy. Has a really frustrating commander deck. I think Edric is a great pick. Edric is my runner-up here. I'm going to go with Command Tower. That was my choice, just because it's the best dual land in Commander. Period.
Yeah.
It fixes your colors every time.
Yeah,
Takes up
untapped
no
dual,
slots in your
perfect
deck.
mana fixing. Like, gets weaker the less colors you are, but stronger the more colors you are. Which is ultimately why I didn't pick it, because if you're playing a 2-color deck, you can play a normal dual land. They're the same power level at that point. Like, the dual land's stronger because you can search for it, right? So ultimately, that's why I didn't end up going with that. And and Edric is just, like, pretty sweet and super powerful and has seen play in Legacy and Cube and is a commander staple. So I'll stick with Edric.
A fine pick. All right, 2 more categories left. Someone's got to be it. Worst card. We got 3.
Weakest card. Not worst card.
Sorry,
not
worst card.
Because worst card could mean anything.
It's true. This is actually, you want to explain this in play design? It's really important.
Oh, yeah, sure. So Magic players tend to use words like good and bad when describing cards. But those words don't actually describe cards very much. Like, what does good actually mean? Like, good at what? Like, good at being strong? Like, good at being cool, flavorful? Like, good doesn't really describe what the card does, right? So working on play design, like, we can't use those words because it just doesn't mean anything. Like, especially in design, because good could mean this card is good for Magic. This card is a positive addition to Magic. Or, like, this card is good at its role that we positioned at. Or, like, this card is good at accomplishing its goal or whatever. But in this situation, good does not mean strong. So we can't use those words. So that's why we use strong and weak. So when Gavin says, what is the worst card? I immediately go to, well, first, what do you mean by worst? Because that could mean anything.
I have changed my category name. Grey Calmos, it is now weakest card. Weakest card. So thank you for that. And great lesson for everyone out there, too. One of the things behind the scenes at Play Design, I think a lot of folks probably don't know. So I've got 3 here for weakest card. One of them is Shared Trauma. That is the Joined Forces mill spell we looked at earlier.
Oh, yeah. That's up there. Okay.
There's Spell Crumple, which doesn't work as intended in Commander anymore, although you could argue at the time it did, so maybe it was fine. And then a card we haven't talked about at all called Riddle Keeper. Riddle Keeper is 2U for a 1/4 homunculus. It is very cute. I'll give it that.
Oh, this card's adorable.
Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature's controller mills 2 cards. Okay. One of these 3, I think is the weakest card. Unless you got another pick, what are you choosing?
It's hard to just say another pick without the card list in front of me, so I'm just going to default with your picks for everything. So it's definitely the Joined Forces card. It's downside in some situations and doesn't do enough for you. And I think the other cards, they have their uses. Like this homunculus, like it's fine. It's a defensive body, and like, I don't know. I usually don't want to mill my opponent, especially if they're playing graveyard stuff. But if maybe I'm using their graveyard and I want to mill them, right? So I can see uses for it.
Yeah, if you're playing a mill deck or something. Yeah, I think I'm going to give it to the shared trauma too. There are cases where it is good, like you generate infinite mana and then you mill everybody and they all lose. But also if you generate infinite mana, you could win in like a lot of different ways. So it's not really doing anything.
Yep.
So I'm going to give it to the shared trauma.
The Spell Crumble is just a cancel. Like, that card's okay.
Yeah. Also, I would personally argue that at the time it worked, so it should be it should be eligible. I'd put it on here just because that was an interesting talking point.
Yeah, actually, at the time, it was a staple in every blue deck. You needed to play your Spell Crumble and your Hinder, the other variant of that.
Yeah, Hinder, of course, you could put it on the top or bottom. That was a big deal. And then finally, the last category. This is what I'm going to call which card won the set. And by this, I mean, it's like a timeless card. When you think of the set, you think of this card. It is a key part of Commander. It is like a great design. Which card won the set? I have 4 options down here, but maybe there's another card we mentioned that you like more. I have Command Tower down again. I've got Chaos Warp, still played in tons of decks today. I've got Hornet Queen, which was played a ton in Standard, still played in Commander a lot, sweet cube card. And also, just as one category, I've got all the Vows because the design is great and it really helped show off what's going on in Commander. Yep. Who do you got for which card won the set for you, Melissa?
All right. I don't think I have to think about this one too hard. For me, it's just Command Tower. It was kind of like a revolutionary, groundbreaking card. We never wrote, the word commander on cards before. And it's strong. It's very functional. It's the perfect mana fixing. And we reprint it in literally every commander deck. So, yep. Command Tower.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. For me, Command Tower, I remember seeing this card and being like, this is what this is about. They're going to make cards for this format. They're going to write the word commander on cards. It was eye-opening. It's in every Commander deck to get today. And even Brian David Marshall, who generally doesn't like cards made in Commander decks, is like, I'll put Command Tower in my deck. So that's a huge pass for me. Well, there are awards. There's only one thing left to do, Melissa.
Okay.
For our final grade of the set.
Okay.
We looked at the set.
A grade. Oh, wow.
A through F, Commander 2011, the first ever Commander decks. We've talked about it. We talked about the cool legends, the deck themes, which cards were great, how it impacted the format, how it was created. Ultimately, looking at it as a full package, what are we giving it?
Oh, wow. Like, honestly, I kind of want to give it an A. Like, it was novel. We had never done it before. It introduced a ton of cool, like, new designs to Magic that had never been done before. Like we talked about Skullbriar. We talked about lots of other things, like political stuff. We talked about, like, the Joint Forces cards. And, like, yes, we have done many things since then. We now design cards specifically for Commander, but like at the time it was just like revolutionary. And the themes were all very cool. So yeah, I kind of want to give it an A, but it's tough because I don't have anything to compare it to. Right.
We get to make the scale here. I mean, I think an A is a pretty good choice. So for me, I'm a big fan, and Patrick Sullivan talks about this too, about grading on a curve, right? Because this was the first of its kind. They don't have all the information we have now. So you have to kind of be like, okay, for the time, what it was, like look back at it and think about how well it was done. And I have to say, even if, like, by today's standards, if we release these decks today, they'd probably be like, I don't know, C level decks or, C plus level decks. Definitely not decks by today's standards.
For sure.
But at the time, like, this did so many things well. It showed off what commanders could be, like what cool commanders were. It showed off political gameplay. It got people interested and excited. It pioneered new space with stuff like the Vows and Command Tower. And also, just importantly, like, this is why we still have Commander decks today and how it kickstarted the whole thing. In fact, Ken Nagel told me to take a direct quote. He said he thought his best design work ever. Not because of necessarily the final output or the final individual cards, but just everything together and the impact it made on Magic. It might be the thing he is most proud of. And yeah, as he said, his best design work, most important design work in history, because he helped pioneer this thing forward. So to me, it's amazing in that sense. There's a couple places I will knock it on. Join Forces, I think, is kind of just a miss as a mechanic to me. Even though even with what they knew at the time, I think Join Forces was a bit of a miss.
Right. Like, they could have cut 2 of the cards from the cycle and had cool cards, right? Like, I mean, I think the green one's cool. I think the white one is fine. And we talked about the red one. Like, it's not a cycle. It's not part of the cycle, but it does something pretty interesting in a multiplayer game. Like, I don't know, in standard sets, if we have cycles and some of the cards are not working, we just take the coolest part of the cycle and just cut the rest. And now it's not a cycle. Now we just have, like, 2 or 3 cool cards that are kind of similar. Like, one example is in Zendikar Rising, the inscriptions. We had the green, black, and blue ones. We had a red and white one at first. We did not come up with anything that we really liked, so we just got rid of them.
Right. Now, granted, people ask for the red and white inscriptions all the time, Melissa, so we got to make those somewhere.
And maybe we'll make them someday.
Put them in a commander deck or something. Yeah, so, I mean, so Join Force is a bit of a knock on, but other than that, I mean, I think these are pretty solid decks. There aren't that many weak cards. A lot of cards still get played, or there aren't that many, there aren't that many cards I look at and I'm like, why does this exist? So I'm pretty torn between either B plus or B plus, A minus, or maybe A. I think I want to save an A for something a little further down the road.
Yeah, maybe so I was like just a little bit too like generous with the A, because like my thought was just for its time, these were very good. Right.
Agreed. I mean, I think these are, I'm going to give it an A minus. That's my official grade.
Yeah. A minus is super solid.
I don't know if there's between a B plus and an A minus.
I don't know how we're going to give out an A to anything, to be honest, because I think we're going to think of tons of problems with all of these decks as we talk about them. Just like there are tons of problems here. So like, is anything going to be an A? Probably not. But like, if you just consider what these decks did for Magic and all the new novel stuff that they came up with, like A makes a lot of sense for like these to be the line for A, like mostly just because of what like the impact on Magic. Like, no, obviously we design decks every year and now we design them like multiple times a year. So there's like diminishing returns on how impactful they're going to be for Magic as a whole. But these commander decks, super high impact for Magic back then.
You know what? I think you talked me into it. I'm going to give these an A. I think it's the first round of them. A lot of the commanders are still played today. There's a lot of sweet cards. It really pushed new design space. Hearing you say that and how it's like, are we going to give anything an A if we don't give these an A? I think you're right. I think you talked me into it. I'm going to give these an A. There's some decks that will not be getting A's. I can tell you that right now off the bat. Right. There are some decks that I think will probably be getting A's. This one, I'm going to give it, even though I was going to critique the Join Forces cycle. I'd critique that I think that the themes of the decks aren't as tight as they could be, like the black blue green deck and the white black green deck. There's some weird stuff going on there. Yeah,
but also you have to consider that these were the first ones ever, and they weren't sure if they were going to make any more.
Right.
So they made the themes kind of like super broad, right? Like, with the exception of maybe the Zedru deck, which is weird. And like, I mean, also you can argue that it is kind of like a broad theme. Like the theme is politics. If you do something good for me, I will give you this cool permanent, right? Like, it's not doing like one specific thing. Yes, it's giving stuff away, but it's not doing like one specific thing very well. The way that we make commander decks now is just like, okay, let's pick one extremely specific thing and just make all the coolest cards we can that do this one specific thing. So given that, like, I don't know, back then I don't think there needed to be very like tight themes for these decks. Like, I think broader ones were fine based on what they knew back then.
I think it's also indicative that I'm looking at all 15 of the new legendary creatures right now, and a lot of them, like at least 10, if not more, are still beloved commanders today, right? Like Skullbriar, yes. Nin the Paid Artist still sees play. Edric, of course. Kaalia, of course. Animar, of course. Riku, Gave, Carador, Zedru, Mimeoplasm, and even like Damia sometimes, I feel good about the A. I feel good about it. Like, these really set the stage for the rest of it. It's like, I would give Alpha an A too, right? It really set the stage for what Magic needed to be. By today's standards, the set has a lot of problems, but like for what it was at the time, it clearly was crucial and got the game started. Here, I think, I was resilient to give it an A. I'm not the kind of person to go and give stuff A's right away. I'm a pretty harsh critic normally, but like, I think just grading on a curve, I think it's an A. I think I'm going to do it.
So now for next time, do we have to think about like, okay, is it an A for its time? Or, we have to think about that from now on because of what we did here.
We'll have to answer that when it comes to looking at the next Commander decks, which you think would be Commander 2012, but is actually Commander 2013. That's a story for next time, though, provided we do it. If you enjoyed this, if you had fun sticking with us for 2 hours and some change, please let us know in the comments down below. Once again, leave a comment, try and boost this up. We are putting a lot of time and effort into this, and it's a really cool topic with a bunch of cool behind the scenes stuff. And I would love to keep doing them for everybody. So please, please, please leave a note. We gotta beat that the video game that exists in SEO.
Yes.
For sure. And I'd be curious to know, by the way, like, what would your grade for this set be? Like, hearing what we've talked about, where do you land this? What grade do you give it? Well, let us know in the comments down below. I think it was really fun to go through. And I gotta say, walking into this, I did not think I'd be giving this an A. I really just didn't. Like, looking at the reprinted cards and all this stuff, I was like, nah, it's not an A. But after talking through it, through all the sweet cards, I'm giving it to it. Do you agree, disagree? Let us know in the comments down below. Well, and if you have any, or tweet at us too, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Gavin Verhey. Melissa is just Melissa D.
It's Melissa
right?
DeTora.
Melissa DeTora?
Just my name, Melissa DeTora. That's it.
Wow.
I'm
so
easy to find.
Just our names.
Yeah.
Good SEO. Doesn't get easier than that. Well, hey, I will talk with you all very soon. And remember, everybody, you got this.
So Fog is a card from Alpha, and of course it's seen more recent printing, but I haven't seen Fog be included in a cube so much. So I was really tempted to just say, well, I mean, we have Howling Mine, we have Fog.